Armed Forces of the Philippines. Welcome, everyone. Pleasant morning to all of you. The Indo-Pacific is such a vital part of our shared world. We all know this. It's rich in life, connecting our nations through trade, culture, and communities. But as we also all know, it faces serious challenges. We've got overfishing, we've got plastic pollution, the growing need to protect freedom of navigation, of course, and marine biodiversity. So today, we are here to exchange ideas, share lessons, and strengthen partnerships because protecting our oceans is not just the job of the government. It takes all of us, civil society, the private sector, the academe, and international partners all working together. So this event is part of the Blue Nations, France and the Philippines Partners for the Oceans Initiative, and it is all about finding real collaborative solutions for sustainable and inclusive maritime governance. So to formally open today's forum, I'm going to call on the president of Strat-Based Institute, Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit, to deliver his opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Our organized events tries to bring everyone together, different sectors, and that's what I feel this morning, just looking at our participants. Earlier this week, we once again heard of another harrowing incident in our seas. Philippine vessels conducting humanitarian missions to provide assistance to fishing folks in Pag-asa Island were subjected again to ramming, dangerous maneuvers, and water cannon attacks by Chinese vessels. Just a month earlier, we saw in the news Philippine vessel in Bao de Masinloc was likewise subjected to the same aggressive tactics, even resulting in injuries to Filipino crewmen. And we have seen the coalition between People's Liberation Army Navy vessel and the China Coast Guard vessel likewise in the waters of Bao de Masinloc after executing aggressive, dangerous maneuvers clearly intended to obstruct one of the Philippine Coast Guard's patrol vessels. Just this week, we emphasized in a statement that we released from the Institute that this growing frequency and intensity of these incidents are deeply alarming. They now demonstrate a dangerous and escalating pattern of aggression. Such behavior, as we have stressed, should not and cannot be normalized or tolerated. It must be met with firm, coordinated, and decisive measures to end this pattern of coercion. Aside from direct acts of aggression, there have also been attempts to legitimize control and restrict access through other means. By manipulating narratives, distorting facts, and using now so-called environmental measures to justify illegal claims. Last month, our coercive northern neighbor, China, announced plans to establish a national nature reserve at Scarborough Shoal. And only 2 days ago, Chinese vessels reportedly began issuing radio warnings, ordering Philippine boats to stay out of what they call environmental reserve. This is the first time Beijing has used such environmental rhetoric to justify its actions. An alarming development in its long documented efforts to restrict Filipino access to our traditional fishing grounds. This, everyone, is a maritime situation in the Philippines that our country, the Philippines, faces today. Constant provocation, aggressive encroachment, the weaponization of environmental measures to undermine our sovereign rights and our exclusive economic rights. Yet, this issue is not the Philippines' concern alone. It reflects a broader behavior that should alarm every nation that values the rules-based international order. What happens in Philippine waters reverberates across the globe, affecting freedom of navigation, global trade, and the integrity of our shared maritime commons. Effective maritime governance is not only about defending one's territory, but also about ensuring that the seas remain a shared space of peace, prosperity, and sustainability. It must bring together not only government, but also civil society, the academe.
Also, our panelists. Today we are especially happy three French researchers, including Mrs. Céline Pajon from the French Institute for International Relations, IFRI, which has been also our partner alongside Stratbase. Thank you, chère Céline, for making the trip this time to be here with us today, and to all those who have made this event possible. Your commitment, your expertise embody the very essence of this initiative, the conviction that dialogue and cooperation are the strongest tools we have to achieve peace and prosperity. Almost exactly a year ago, in October 24, we gathered for the first edition of the Blue Talks. And what began at the time as a shared reflection between France and the Philippines on the way to the third United Nations Ocean Conference, which took place in Nice last June, has become a regular and meaningful dialogue, a dialogue that has grown in scope and ambition. Each edition has explored new dimensions of our partnership, from environmental protection to blue economy, maritime security, and today we will take our reflection to a step deeper to talk about inclusive governance. Our discussion comes at a time when the question of governance is at the heart of the goals and challenges we face. The BBNJ Treaty will soon come into force after its ratification by more than 60 states lately at the UN General Assembly, including the Philippines, and I think we can really thank and praise the Philippines for achieving that. Thank you for that. Sustainable governance of the oceans is at the heart of this treaty, and its implementation will be of crucial importance for the survival of our oceans. Governance is also traditionally at the center of discussion and member states, especially regarding the code of conduct, and will probably be an important matter as the Philippines prepare to chair ASEAN in 26. And finally, governance can only be at the heart of any discussion taking place in the Indo-Pacific, a region of immense promise, but also of growing tension, climate threats. In this regard, France remains steadfast in supporting multilateralism and a rules-based international order, especially in the Indo-Pacific. France's presence and commitment to the stability of the region alongside the Philippines is the result of a simple truth. We are not distant observers of the Indo-Pacific. We are part of it. From La Réunion in the Indian Ocean to New Caledonia and French Polynesia in the South Pacific, France is an Indo-Pacific nation, a resident power with its citizens, with partners, with responsibilities across this vast, immense maritime space. Therefore, France reiterates its unwavering commitment to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and recalls the importance of the 2016 arbitral award as a cornerstone of international jurisprudence. Upholding these principles is a matter of global order. And the Philippines has been an essential voice in this effort as a maritime nation like us, as a democracy like us, and as a country deeply committed to the rule of law as us. Your leadership, your experience in defending international norms are essential to the stability of the region. And I want to highlight here the ever deepening relationship between my country and the Philippines as maritime security and defense and security is concerned. Since the signature of the letter of intent between our Minister of Armed Forces, December 23, our bilateral cooperation has gained new momentum. This landmark agreement set the foundations for closer defense collaboration, capacity building, regular exchanges on strategic challenges, particularly in the maritime domain. Our engagement has moved beyond declarations towards tangible joint initiatives, information sharing, and trust building. It is through those actions and through platforms such as today's conference that we strengthen the resilience of our societies and safeguard the stability of our common region. Thanks to the significant level of trust we now share, we must continue to exchange our assessments of the asymmetric threats we face collectively. Beyond security and sovereignty, we must never forget that the ocean is also a human space, one that sustains lives, livelihoods,
and partners from France, their Indo-Pacific community, our friends from the media, pleasant and wonderful blue day to all. Bonjour. It is an honor for me to join you today to provide some insights on strengthening maritime governance in the Indo-Pacific, a region that is as vast as it is vital. The seas that connect us are not merely bodies of water. They are arteries of our shared prosperity, security, and survival. The Indo-Pacific, home to more than half of the world's population, is also the stage for complex geopolitical rivalries, environmental degradation, and competing maritime claims. For us in the Philippines, the sea is not just a geographic feature. It is our history, our economy, our future, our lifeline. It defines who we are as a people and what we stand for as a nation. But the same waters that connect us also expose us to shared vulnerabilities, environmental degradation, illegal fishing, pollution, and increasingly challenged, especially the West Philippine Sea, by coercive, aggressive, and unlawful actions that undermine regional stability and threaten the rules-based international order. While I am designated as spokesperson of the National Maritime Council, the views that I will share with you this morning do not in any way reflect the position of the Council, but rather on a personal view and thoughts, especially born from my past experiences as the former commander of the Western Command of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, at the time when the artificial island building activities of the Chinese at the West Philippine Sea were in full swing. And also one of the original members of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, the Brigadier General Bautista here present today. And as the representative of the Department of Energy during the previous administration, and as well as my current engagements with the different member agencies of the Council. That being said, I'd like to convey a policy perspective that sustainable and inclusive maritime governance must be the foundation of both security and prosperity in our region. Allow me to provide context on why maritime governance matters. We are operating in an increasingly complex Indo-Pacific environment. The West Philippine Sea, for example, has become the front line or stage of Chinese gray zone activities characterized by illegal, coercive, aggressive maneuvers, ramming, and water cannon incidents, just like the recent incident in our territorial waters of Pagasa and the 11 August PLA Navy colliding instead with the Chinese Coast Guard, as earlier mentioned by Professor Manil, as well as the deceptive or cognitive warfare campaigns that test not only our sovereignty and territorial integrity, sow discord and disunity among our people, but also our governance resilience. This makes maritime governance no longer a technical or environmental issue. It is a matter of strategic necessity. With strong maritime governance, it allows us to, one, protect our marine environment and economic zones. Second, uphold international law. And third, manage our maritime spaces coherently from the highest policy level down to the coastal barangay, the lowest form or unit of government in the Philippines. In essence, strong maritime governance ensures that our seas remain a source of life and not conflict. From the National Maritime Council's policy standpoint, The Philippines envisions a maritime governance framework that is integrated, sustainable, and inclusive. To be integrated at best, we need to align the actions of our maritime agencies, defense, foreign affairs, fisheries, environment, transportation under a single cohesive and coherent direction. To be sustainable, we need to manage our marine resources responsibly to support both livelihood and biodiversity. And to be inclusive, we need to ensure that local communities and fisher folks are part of governance decisions, not merely subjects of them. France, I believe, shares this same vision as a resident in the Pacific nation with territories and interests in the region. France has been a strong advocate for a free, open, and sustainable Indo-Pacific, principles that deeply resonate with the Philippine position. There are several pathways where France and the Philippines can cooperate towards a sustainable and inclusive maritime governance. First, we can enhance joint maritime domain awareness through shared surveillance data, satellite technologies, and coordinated research. The Philippines' strategic location and France's technological expertise make for a natural partnership in monitoring illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, marine pollution, and marine inversions. Second, we must expand capacity building for blue economy governance, developing policies that balance economic use of the seas with ecological integrity. Through French-supported programs on marine science, renewable energy, and sustainable aquaculture, the Philippines can enhance its blue economy roadmap.
waves with precision and purpose. Valued at 400 million euro and backed by French sovereign financing. This vessels isn't about just merely capability. It is a beacon for our shipbuilding industry. Considering that with 20 of these boats, it will be constructed right here in the Philippines, fostering technology transfer and advancing our self-reliant defense posture. It is a testament to France's investment in our future, not just arming us, but also building us. Yet, as we celebrate these strides, let us widen our horizon beyond the narrow lens of security. Maritime governance is no mere sidebar to conflict. It is the very compass of our own ocean stewardship. It spans maritime safety, regulatory frameworks, marine environmental protection, law enforcement, and yes, security. All domains squarely under the Philippine Coast Guard's mandate, from safeguarding lives at sea to enforcing laws in our vast maritime jurisdiction. As we delve deeper, you'll see how this governance becomes our sharpest tool against the shadows of coercion, the gray zone tactics of the People's Republic of China that they deploy in the West Philippine Sea on a day-to-day basis. From unmarked vessel swarms to aggressive harassment that skirts the edge of armed conflict without crossing it. These actions erode our fisheries, intimidate our fisher folk, and chip away at our rights, all below the threshold of war. But maritime governance, empowered by the unyielding anchor of international law, rises stronger, a framework for rules-based order that demands accountability without firing a single shot. Thus, this brings me to the significance of the French-Philippine maritime cooperation, from early focuses on safety and economic connectivity to bolstering law enforcement capability of the Coast Guard asset to today's united front against illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive maneuvering of the People's Republic of China. As a proud blue nation, a maritime power with a coastline rivaling continents, and a strategy that champions ocean sustainability, France's instincts align perfectly with ours, ensuring that the sea lines of communication threading the West Philippine Sea and the broader South China Sea remain safe, secure, and stewards of our fragile environment. Thus, I would argue that there are 6 possible policy recommendations as to how we can explore how the Philippines and France can spearhead cooperative efforts to strengthen maritime governance. First, we need to fortify the maritime domain awareness structure of our National Maritime Center, the vigilant eyes and ears feeding intelligence to the National Maritime Council, ensuring that no shadow slips unseen. The maritime domain awareness is the foundational understanding of all activities, be they commercial, environmental, or adversarial in our vast maritime area. As a central hub for gathering and disseminating information for critical intelligence, the National Maritime Center plays a pivotal role in empowering the National Maritime Council. It was just established last year, coming from the National Coast Watch through the Executive Order 9 number 57, to coordinate our national maritime security efforts. Yet, as recent assessment highlights, the National Maritime Council as a whole still grapples with gaps in technology, budget, and experience that hinder comprehensive MDA coverage across our archipelagic water. France, with its advanced surveillance system and experience in Indo-Pacific monitoring, can lead by sharing satellite imagery, AI-driven analytics, and joint training program, much like the European Union's Primario initiative, that have bolstered regional maritime situational awareness. Second, by championing civil societies, non-governmental organizations, and academia with targeted education and training to safeguard our marine environment, turning knowledge into front lines of conservation. Our oceans are under siege not only from geopolitical tension, but from the silent creep of degradation, overfishing, plastic pollution, and coral bleaching that diminish the very bounty we fight to protect. Here, a whole of society approach is essential. The France Blue Nations Initiative, which was launched earlier this year, exemplifies this by fostering partnership that equip local communities, environmental NGO like the WWF Philippines, and academic institutions such as the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute. Through workshop on ocean literacy and hands-on training in remote sensing technology, this effort empowered grassroots advocates to document illegal activities and advocate for marine protected areas. Third, by investing in education and capacity building for our maritime security agencies. Our agencies from the Philippine Coast Guard and the Philippine National Police Maritime Group stand as a thin blue line, but their effectiveness hinges on continuous professional development amid evolving threats like hybrid warfare and cyber intrusion and navigation system. France's long-standing commitment shines through in bilateral exchanges and EU-backed programs such as the recent Technical Assistance Project that enhances seafarer training and certification standard, ensuring that our personnel meet global benchmarks in search and rescue, anti-piracy operation, and even environmental response. Joint exercises like those under Primario 2 framework further hone the skills in information sharing and crisis simulation. Fourth, by sustaining support for vessel acquisition, not just for the Philippine Coast Guard, but also for the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, amplifying governance functions like safety and enforcement far beyond the specter of conflict. The recent landmark agreement of 40 fast patrol boats from France marks a quantum leap for the Coast Guard. However, this should also be extended to our fisheries agency, which also face harassment while monitoring sustainable fishing zones, would equip it with multi-roles capability for staff assessment and anti-illegal fishing enforcement. Fifth, by urging France to lead the chorus in Europe, framing our stand in the West Philippine Sea not as a solitary sovereignty skirmish, but as a global crusade for the rule of law that every nation honoring the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea must join. As a signatory to UNCLOS with vast Indo-Pacific interests, France has repeatedly championed the 2016 arbitral ruling invalidating the excessive claim in our waters, including through joint note verbal with Germany and the UK that reaffirms the treaty's universality. By leveraging its influence in the European Union, where it advocates for coordinated maritime operations and blue diplomacy, France can really get the broader continental support from enhanced funding for UNCLOS implementation to multilateral statements to condemn coercion. And six, by leveraging the enduring might of the French Navy, its deployments through the South China Sea and beyond, serving as a steadfast deterrent, reminding aggressors that freedom of navigation is non-negotiable. With one of the world's most capable blue water fleet, French naval forays such as the Clemenceau 25 Carrier Strike Group exercise in late 2024 and Charles de Gaulle's pivotal Pacific deployment in early 2025 project power without provocation, participating in multilateral drills like Lafaros alongside Southeast Asian partners, affirm interoperability and resolve. These operations, shadowed yet unchallenged by regional actors, underscore France's commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. It deters escalation through visible presence and precision strikes capability. This leverage is vital in an era of asymmetric threats. A credible deterrent like France's Navy buys time for diplomacy, protects vital sea lanes, carrying 90% of global trade, and reassures smaller states like ours that alliances means action and not just words. Distinguished colleagues, the Indo-Pacific beckons not as a battlefield, but a shared horizon. Let this whole of society surge, government societal spark, legal lighthouse, and partnership power dispel the coercion and aggression of the People's Republic of China.
Report, this is the template, so to say, but the report was also published by Stratbase. You can find it on Stratbase website as well. And for so in our piece, we made the case for an enhanced maritime cooperation between our two countries. We showed that the strategic rationale for such a rapprochement is very strong, and we also suggested some framework for action to operationalize the cooperation. So when looking at the reason why reinforcing French-Philippines maritime cooperations, governance appear indeed as a central concern, and I can only double down on what has been said before, and especially by Madame Ambassadrice. France, as the Philippines, is a maritime nation of the Indo-Pacific, outstanding interest at sea. Just to remind that 90% of our very large EEZ is in the Indo-Pacific and 60% in the Pacific. So France is crucial region. As it was also said before, violation of law committed in one region have repercussion in another one. All theaters are now connected. We are well aware of that. In addition, any disruption of the vital maritime routes passing through the South China Sea would be dramatic for European and French economic and trade security. So France has repeatedly called for the resolution of disputes in accordance with international law, but not only, as was also mentioned, French Navy ships regularly transit through the South China Sea to exercise freedom of navigation and concretely uphold UNCLOS. And so this year, for the first time, the French carrier strike group transited through the South China Sea, sending a powerful message to disruptors of international law. And actually, we've seen in recent years only intensification of the French patrol in the region. So we are confident that our presence in the area, especially with our partners, whether European partners or American or Asian partner, can deter inappropriate behaviors. Maritime governance is also a key concern for France, as it is responsible for monitoring, managing, and protecting the vast maritime domains of our territories in the Pacific, New Caledonia, and French Polynesia. It's actually very interesting to note, underline that in our report, that this territory in the Pacific and the Philippines shares a lot of commonalities regarding maritime security challenges and opportunities. Both territories rely heavily on marine and coastal ecosystems for economic activities like tourism and fisheries. And these activities, we know, are highly sensitive to climate impact, including rising sea levels, stronger cyclones, and biodiversity loss. So we think that if this paves the way for fruitful two-way exchanges about best practices, innovative approaches, and coordination of maritime policy among local and national authorities. So how to concretely reinforce our cooperation while contributing to a stronger maritime governance? We need to uphold existing law by reiterating its legitimacy diplomatically through not verbal, through protest when we need to do so. But we also need to ensure that law is actually respected. It means being able to monitor maritime areas, to discourage violation of law, but also ensure that regulation is actually known by everybody, socially accepted, and upheld by all players, including coastal communities, fishermen, and so on. And so because maritime issues are multidimensional, to ensure relevant cooperation and support, we need to break silos and advance a comprehensive approach of maritime security and governance encompassing environmental security, blue economy, tackling crimes at sea, and challenges to sovereignty. Because we know that non-traditional security issues are very destabilizing factors that can be used and manipulated by malicious actors in guise of, trying to destabilize and show advance some hybrid measures. So in our paper with my co-authors, we highlighted some sectors that would be particularly fruitful to advance bilateral cooperation. First, of course, strengthening maritime domain awareness is absolutely key to improve the country's comprehensive maritime security, address biodiversity conservation, combating IUU fishing, and reinforcing sovereignty. It presents a promising entry point for cooperation as the Philippines is looking to get a more unified view of its busy maritime environment. And France has some specific model and some kind of governance that the Philippines could also look at, and we can exchange idea about it. For example, in terms of MDA, we have what we call the French MICA Center in Brest. The MICA Center model relies on the voluntary cooperation of ship owners to collect information on maritime security and disseminate it to relevant authorities. So this is a quite interesting way to show a collaboration and to advance security for all. In addition, in our paper, we suggest that a bilateral agreement on white shipping between the Philippines and France could also greatly benefit both countries, as it would enhance the security of the Filipino seafarer, while also strengthening French understanding of maritime dynamic in the South China Sea. So one key aspect is reinforcing information sharing between our two countries. Another aspect is capacity building, and we referred to that a bit before in terms of equipment, logistic, and training, building ISR capacity and providing more equipment to the Philippines Coast Guard in particular, who are at the forefront of all challenges in the South China Sea.
So it was also already mentioned, but the French company OCEA has contributed 40 patrol boats to the Philippine Coast Guard, 20 of them being constructed in the Philippines, so contributing for more enhancement of local knowledge and local shipyard. A third sector would be to share, listen, learn, and best practices in marine resource protection and governance. And here I'm thinking especially of the French territories in the Indo-Pacific, which share similar issues, like regarding tackling IUU fishing, protecting biodiversity. Marine protected areas is an interesting option. And for example, the French Polynesia has launched its own kind of model of marine protected area. They call it a maritime managed area. It's actually integrated traditional Polynesian stewardship with modern marine management and scientific monitoring. And it's also making efforts to link environmental protection with blue economy development, including ecotourism, fisheries, and renewable energy. So this looks like a promising way to think together and to enhance the security. So as a guise of conclusion, in our paper, we are calling as a way forward and to continue maybe the efforts that have been started with the Blue Talks series to launch a track 1.5 dialogues between our two countries on a global maritime issue. It would be an important step to sustain the effort toward a deepening of maritime partnership. It would provide a regular venue to exchange views between a large group of experts, both from the human sciences and hard sciences, a practitioner, business sector, and so it would be a useful way to advance the whole of society approach in terms of maritime governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Céline Pajon, for laying out the many ways that France and the Philippines can have more fruitful two-way exchanges. I believe during the panel, we're going to be touching more on, we're going to be delving into some of the themes that you touched on, like advancing maritime domain awareness, as well as capacity building to the Philippine Coast Guard. Okay, so which brings me to our final panelist for this session. He is a non-resident fellow of the Strat-Based Institute. He's also a non-resident research fellow of the Korea Institute of Maritime Strategy, or KIMS, and the Yokosuka Council on Asia-Pacific Studies. Please welcome, I knew him before he became a doctor, Dr. Benjamin Blandon.
Well, first of all, warm thanks to Dr. Manit, for which I met 3 years ago when I was barely starting my PhD, and that we've kept in contact for all this time. So thank you for having me again, and especially for this last session of the Blue Talks. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I will start my presentation on the impacts, plural, of the tension and dispute in the South China Sea. So I will try to speak as little as possible about China, but I will have to, because it's really at the core of the picture. So please, next one. Here, it's a map that I extracted from my research. So it's a map of the southern part of the South China Sea, where I simply applied not a geographic approach, but geostrategic approach, pinpointing every military installation of every country operating in the South China Sea, particularly in the Spratlys. So you see a lot of yellow, which is Vietnam. You see a little bit of red, which is China. Green is for the Philippines, and orange to the south is Malaysia and Brunei. Next one, please. Oh, okay. Next one, please. In this space, what exactly is happening? So we know there's incidents, we know there's disputes, but what are the numbers? We always see papers all the time, but the data that you see here is from the CSIS AMTI, Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative. So they were able to list 73 major incidents at sea in the South China Sea between 2010 and 2020. Actually, I have worked with them to update those data for after 2020. So here, 73 incidents 50% in that period concerned China and Vietnam, and 25% China and the Philippines. Since 2020, the percentage has reversed. Vietnam is less than 20%. Philippines is probably 60 to 70% of all confrontations with China. So just to give a little overview. The rest of the data is within Southeast Asian countries or within Southeast Asian countries and Taiwan. But the vast majority is really between China and Vietnam plus the Philippines. Next one. And as part of my research, I wanted to understand and to frame exactly who is doing what, where, when, how, with what regularity, what intensity. And this gives way to this list of 300 phenomena of what I call asymmetric warfare. So in my words, when I use asymmetric warfare, it's a combination of area denial, hybrid warfare, and gray zone tactics, the whole of it. Because the main actor that we find behind all or most of those incidents, more than 85%, is China. So here we have 300 phenomena. I was able to find 750 individual examples to frame the situation in space and time and to illustrate it. So you have those three theoretical silos to the right and to the left. Those are 12 different families of on the ground or at sea phenomena to make sense, to actually make sense of what is happening. Next one. So, and a succession, quicker succession. So here you see the land reclamation at Subi, Mischief, or Fury. You can see some of the things that you know about the land reclamation, the militarization of the features, the fact of positioning floating surveillance platforms, militarizing stations, the maritime militia. Next one. The militarization of the Coast Guard, or the fact of positioning sovereignty markers, even in the form of some sort of crystal pyramids at the bottom of James Shoal, 22 meters below water. To the right, you see maritime militia vessels being painted white with the mention China Coast Guard. So it's not a Coast Guard vessel. It's not a Coast Guard crew. They are not doing Coast Guard missions. But if you go after them, they will surely retaliate at you just like if it was. So just to give a few examples. And what you see here is actually a very, very small fraction. Remember, 300 different phenomena. Here I only shown 12 out of 300. But what is also very interesting to notice is that out of all those 300 phenomena that I was able to list, only 23% is actually what we see on TV. The ramming, the water cannoning, and all those things. Only 23% is visible and displayed on TV, meaning 80 or near 80% never appears on TV. Next one. So those things happening in the South China Sea have multiple impacts, whether in the West Philippine Sea, the East Sea, or the Malaysian part of the South China Sea. So we know, and we talk a lot about security impacts or sovereignty impacts, but we also have social, societal, political, economic, legal, environmental, and also in terms of development. So it's a really multifaceted string of impacts. Next one. Here, I will not address all of them. I don't have nearly enough time, but I will focus on the environmental aspect and economic aspect. Here you can see Scarborough Shoal to the top left and the impact of what has been done by poachers, militias, fishermen in terms of IUU fishing and poaching. So these marks that you see, those scars, and actually CSIS MTI published a paper called Blue Scars in the South China Sea dating back 2023. They shown the endangerment caused to the flora and the fauna of the South China Sea, but more particularly in the West Philippine Sea. So those circular marks are the use of very high pressure water jet to detach the giant clams from the reef. So that's just one of the different techniques that they have. And the result, you can see it on the bottom right of the map. And so far, 20 reefs and shoals of the South China Sea look like that. And maybe more, but at least 20 from my research. Next one. So what is the environmental impact? We have destroyed coral reef, we have damaged coral reef, we have overfishing and IUU fishing, we have illegal giant clams harvesting, and endangered species. About the coral reef, we know that back in 2023, because I remind you that the survey from CSIS MTI is from 2023. At that time, 2.5 years ago, we had 6,000 more acres of destroyed reef. And we have almost 3 times as much, 16,535 acres of damaged reef. So it's just gigantic in terms of proportion. And since Vietnam has undergone on its side massive reclamation as well, we can probably assume that the numbers are 50% higher than what you see here. Also, The overfishing, we know that fish catch have been stagnating since the mid 1990s, which means less resources for the fishermen. They have to go at sea for much longer. They have to use more gas. They have to use more to take more risk also to keep doing the same catch. Next one. And also beyond just fishing, we know that there's a number of activities that are considered integral part of the blue economy that are just absent. They don't exist. And we are not talking just West Philippines again. Vietnam is the same. Malaysia is the same. I mean, there's Swallow Reef in Malaysia. That's a good thing. It does exist. You have Phu Quoc in Vietnam. You have T2 Island in the Philippines, but it's not nearly close to what it should be in a normal standard blue economy. So in the entire space, really from the Gulf of Tonkin all the way to the Yellow Sea, we don't see cruise. We don't see much diving or boat races or regattas or yachting or anything. And that is not normal. It's not normal for different reasons. It's not normal because China is there. It's also not normal because some countries out of protection, I mean, they cared about protecting their citizens and they established restrictions to activities at sea. Oh, sorry. Please let me know if too low. And all of those things, which would be an asset for developing the coastal areas, giving jobs, giving training opportunities, getting infrastructure investment, and all those things is not there because those things don't exist or they don't exist at the level that they should. And it's very striking to see that they exist in the Sulu Sea, they exist in the Celeb Sea, they exist in other bodies of water, but the South China Sea. So there's really a continuity of this missing partially or totally in such or such areas of the South China Sea. Next one. Other activities are impacted. I said about the fishing, but also the energy, and I think the Philippines are pretty aware about that, given what's been happening at Reed Bank. The scientific activities also, marine scientific research, subsea ecology, mining, maritime transportation, and infrastructure. And if I can take a few seconds about my own case, I tried to go to T2 Island. It's not off limit. You can go. So I booked a ticket. I paid my due. And just a few days before departing, I received an email. Oh, sorry, sir. Actually, we couldn't repair some of the things in the boat. So we have not been green lighted for going at sea from Puerto Princesa. I said, okay, let's go next month. I agreed to be postponed. And then the next month, again, and the next month again. And at that time, I felt, wow, they really have a lot of issues with their boats and repairs. And actually, I learned later that actually it was because of deployment of Chinese ships, making it impossible to reach safely T2 Island. And that's a good example, I think, about what I mentioned. The authorities want to protect the life of their citizens or tourists, people like me. But when it lasts too long, or when it is too restrictive, it has a real impact on the national economy, meaning those countries are establishing protection that ultimately can damage your own economic interests. Next one. So I've been talking about different impact. It's also important to notice that those impacts are direct at sea. We've seen them. They can be also indirect or induced. So that's what I mean. You are confronted to a danger at sea, so you deploy boats. Because you deploy boats, you forbid civilians or economic activities to take place there. Because you do that, you impede the coastline to develop and you deprive people from job opportunities or training. And it's all really connected. Next one. Now, if we talk about indirect impact or induced impact, that's just what I try to do. The restrictions can have a multiple number of impacts, and especially for the fishermen, because fishermen are the backbone of all the blue economy in any country in the world. So when you impeach those people to have a livelihood, whether it's fishing or tourism or else, the community where they live, they will have stagnant revenues, and therefore they will not invest in training, social welfare, infrastructure, you name it. And therefore it creates a cascade of impacts covering the whole coastline. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could happen that fishermen led to despair in just trying to seek for livelihood for their wives or kids or their families and so on, just like it happened in Somalia or in Sumatra at some point. And I'm not justifying anything here. I'm just saying it could happen because we have seen it happen. In Somalia, when the fishermen had their fishing areas depleted by Chinese trawlers, they started resorting more and more to criminal activities. And that could be an outcome. So what I mean, and I'm reaching the very end of my presentation, I don't say it's going to happen at all, or that it could happen in the next 2, 3, or 5 years. I'm just saying there's risk to not reinvesting the maritime domain, reinvesting the blue economy, and that countries surrounding the South China Sea needs an action plan to reinvest and reconquer their legitimate rights in the South China Sea. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer any question or to intervene in the next part of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benjamin Blandin. I hope one day you make it out to T2 Island. But you know, he's been guesting on our show for what, a couple of years now, I think, right? But even for me, this is the first time I'm hearing about your statistic about nearly 80% of these asymmetric warfare tactics don't. The number of incidents out at sea has doubled compared to. All right, in the last 5 years, the number of incidents has doubled. And again, also nearly 80% of the asymmetric warfare tactics don't make it to the news. Everything from, I didn't even know there was such a thing as fake scientific vessels or sovereignty markers. But thank you for highlighting that for us. With that, I think we're very well set up for a very interesting discussion. So let's start with our first panel for the day. And I'd like to invite back on stage Vice Admiral Alexander Lopez, Commodore J. Tariela, Miss Celine Pajon, and of course, Dr. Benjamin Blandin. And to moderate and engage and facilitate this open forum, we have with us today Dr. Chester Cabalza. He is also a non-resident fellow of the Stratbase Institute and also a founding president of the International Development and Security Corporation, or IDSC.
Thank you, Regina. Sir, can you please move forward? Because I'm going to grill you this morning, okay? Right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We heard a lot of sound bites or quotable quotes from our credible speakers this morning. So this time around, I'll use my privilege as the moderator to ask the question first, and then later on, we'll open it to the audience. Okay, I like the way you, Admiral Lopez, discuss about the history, economic lifeline, source of life of our oceans and seas, and it should not be a source of conflict. You mentioned there, but as the National Maritime Council continues to harmonize the country's maritime policies and strategies, what are the key priorities and reforms do you see as the most critical in strengthening the Philippines' ability to effectively enforce its maritime jurisdiction?
Of course, from the policy standpoint of the National Maritime Council, first we should have integration. Because the council is composed of the different agencies, departments of our government that has a stakehold on the maritime environment. So these different agencies should be integrated. And that's the role, mandate of the council, to have a coherent and cohesive approach in addressing maritime concerns. So that's basic. So we need to have, we should be speaking one voice and doing things in a coherent and cohesive fashion.
Okay, but of course we have now partnerships like with France, Blue Nation partners. And how do we handle this now? Given that of course a lot of countries now are partnering with the Philippines, how do we elevate this kind of relationship? Given that of course the objective there is for maritime rules-based governance.
Yeah, another policy, we are working on some policies, like for example, working on the directives, marching orders of our president. First, we should be resolving disputes through peaceful means and working through our partners, working on the multilateral perspective, like-minded nations, treaty allies, and of course, they include France. So we need to come up with these things so that as a small country, we can be a big voice too in the region.
That's excellent. Okay, Commodore Tariela, of course, you're the face of the transparency strategy of the country. And what's next now for the Philippines? Of course, we have ex-hosted that already, or have we ex-hosted it already, or what's next now for us, given that, of course, you are an advocate of maritime governance?
Thank you very much, Professor. for a very interesting question. Actually, I already had this question coming from the German ambassador himself. He asked me when, for almost 2 years already of doing the transparency effort, he's like, during the early days of the transparency efforts, you told me, Jay, that the objective is to create awareness among the Filipino people. And right now, according to the most recent Pulse Asia survey, more than 90% of the Filipinos are already aware of
So
what's
we've reached at
yeah,
least.
we have already reached that.
Okay.
So this also now is related to your question. What comes next after that? Well, the transparency effort is just one of those strategies that we're using in asserting our rights in the West Philippine Sea. And the informational as an instrument of our national power became a foundation of how we assert our rights. One, we make sure that the international community, we build upon the awareness of the international community by strengthening and deepening our security arrangement with a lot of countries. We now have RAA with Japan. We have different security arrangement with New Zealand, Australia, France, Germany. All of this European Union had become more aware of the blatant violation of the international law of the People's Republic of China that allows them to deepen also their engagement with the Philippine government to strengthen our alliance and also to deter China's growing aggression. So that's one. Second, I would like to believe that the informational that we're doing is still needed for us to counter the misinformation and fake news, the malign operation of the People's Republic of China that is doing almost every day that still sometimes confuse not just the Filipino audience, but even the international community. So for me, the transparency efforts that we're doing right now is just the starting point, and it will still going to be maintained. If the question is what comes next after the awareness of everybody in the world, I told the German ambassador, we can, as a small nation like the Philippines, we can only provide the starting page of our fight against a bully country like the People's Republic of China. The next succeeding pages of our story in fighting against China's blatant violation will be written by countries like France, European Union, the United States, the countries who believe on the international law. As I said a while ago during my speech, it is important for the international community to understand that our fight for the West Philippine Sea is not just about our fight for sovereignty and sovereign rights. It is a fight for everybody who values the international law. And this is the most important thing that the transparency is sharing to the world.
Wow, that's it gives us a bigger picture of what we're gonna do in the succeeding years. Okay, I'd like to ask more questions later on, but of course, Miss Celine, in your paper, you have the case of for enhanced France-Philippines maritime cooperation, and you emphasize that cooperation must be global and comprehensive, encompassing environment, economy, maritime security, and defense. So, how can France and the Philippines better complement each other's maritime foreign policy priorities, so that these pillars become mutually reinforcing rather than addressed in isolation? So, how do you see that?
I think that we have a lot in common, as I underlined in my presentation. So we uphold the rule of law at sea. We face also similar challenges in terms of hybrid warfare and so on, especially at sea also. And we have also a lot of complementarity. We in France, we can learn a lot from the Philippines as being a frontline state with daily challenges. So that's why I think the information sharing and trying to build as many channel of communication as possible would be of very useful interest for us. And also in France, we have some technical strengths and also some model of governance that could be of use for the Philippines to develop their own governance in terms of maritime security. So we both have commonalities and complementarities on which we can work on. And as I explained also, I mean, maritime issue, all is connected. You cannot just look at sovereignty or just look at biodiversity and so on. All is connected. So, so we really need to try to break silos and try to make the different institutions to work together. But of course, this is a very huge challenge for every countries. In terms of maritime governance, in France, we have a particular model with one key authorities, which is Secrétariat Général de la Mer, so the sea secretariat who has over heading various agencies and institutions that are looking at the various dimensions of maritime security. As you know, we do not have a Coast Guard, full-fledged Coast Guard in France. We have, we say, Coast Guard functions operated by the Navy, but also some police forces and so on. So this kind of unified kind of command and so on can be of interest also to share with the Philippines.
That's interesting because of the gaps that we are seeing and insecurity. It shows that amongst nations, we complement because of these insecurities and gaps that you are presenting lately, no? In terms of the maritime governments that we are. Okay, Dr. Benjamin, you had the research on deterrence and the collaboration of maritime domain awareness. We had the powerful presentation earlier there. In what ways can France and the Philippines advance cooperative approaches to reinforce maritime governance and regional stability in the Indo-Pacific?
On many occasions, it has been said that there was too many maritime agencies in the Philippines, but also in Indonesia, Vietnam, or Malaysia, where I personally reside. I would say it's not so much a question of how many agencies, but how do they work together. So we approach the concept of single point of contact, whether it's one man or one team or one institution. And I think that France could really be maybe not a model, but an inspiration for the Philippines on that regard, because we have many maritime agencies. So Dr. Pajon said maritime constabulary, maritime police, customs, navy, coast guard, safety of life at sea agencies. We have many of them, but at least we have this unifier that is I cannot find the English way to translate the Secrétariat Général de la Mer, but and that I think could be an inspiration. So, for example, eventually, I mean, I don't talk at all for the government. It's really on my personal capacity, but I would think that it could be interesting to have agents from the Philippines, from the various Philippine agencies to actually not just go and visit, but stay and work alongside French institution of the kind to see in the long term how it works and how they could extract valuable lessons that they can maybe import in the Philippines.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for that unifying factor that you're seeing in terms of the gaps and, of course, how could we cooperate more? Okay, let's open the floor to the audience now. Yes, please, sir.
Good morning. I'm Frederick Riet from the delegation of the European Union to the Philippines. As the panel will be aware, next year the Philippines will hold the chairship of ASEAN. In that context, I wanted to check with everybody from the panel what the expectations are regarding the negotiations on the code of conduct and whether there are expectations that will make a difference in the conduct of certain parties in the South China Sea. And the other question that I would have, that in case the negotiations do not progress as foreseen or as wished, if I'm not mistaken, the president at some point hinted at a sort of ad hoc code of conduct from a coalition of the willing, to call it like that, of a smaller party of maritime claimant states. Is there any update regarding that could be shared, or thank you?
Okay, thank you. There are two questions. Maybe Admiral, you answer the first and then a commenter later on the second question.
Actually, we are taking our chairship of the ASEAN very seriously. And definitely the maritime concerns is a big part of it. However, I'm not privy actually on what the design, but because our DFA in particular cautioned us not to be too open on the maritime issues. so as not to preempt our president from coming up with more policy guidelines as we near the convening of our chairship of the ASEAN. But suffice to say that again, the code of conduct would be one of the objectives, perhaps, in order to come up with a more binding and more relative significant conduct between nations. And we would like to take this opportunity actually of being the chair of the Sen in the this coming year. Thank you.
Commenter, yeah, please.
You know, Professor, I would really love to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
But as what Yusek Lopez said, I have been cautioned a lot of times talking about this. So I'm not going to say something about the code of conduct and all. But I would like to, I'm just going to stay on my lane. On the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we are envisioning for a much more active ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. The Commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard right now, Admiral Ronnie Hilgavan, wants to engage Southeast Asian countries, since we are the chairman of the Southeast Asian Summit next year, to take this opportunity for all of those Coast Guard organization, maritime law enforcement, to also sit on one table, talk about different issues, and not just about the South China Sea conflict, like issues about maritime safety, search and rescue, or environmental protection. Those kind of functions that we have that advance maritime cooperation among Coast Guard agencies. Thank you.
Although I have my own opinion also, but I'll be wearing my hat as the moderator today. Okay. Questions for our French speakers, please? From the media first, and then, of course, sir. Okay. Please proceed, sir.
Hello, good morning, sir. I don't want to put our government officials here on the spot, but I think I have to ask this now. We're all talking about carrying the torch forward, and then the French very willing, and other allies saying that they will willing to be to help the Philippines. No? So moving forward, carrying the torch of international law and rules-based order, how important is it at this point that the next leadership of our country would still support these initiatives, and what would be the impact should the Philippines once again turn its back on Europe, the US, and the order that's being pushed at the moment? And we've seen the effects, we've seen how dangerous it is, we've seen the impact on environment, as the good professors have already shown. So at this point, how important is it that the next administration would be carrying the torch forward in a similar manner and upholding the transparency that we enjoy right now?
So for sure, that's for the Filipino speakers.
But we would also like to hear from our members of the academy.
Okay, thank you very much. As you have observed how this administration is handling this situation, and we'd like to think that we're doing it very well. Maybe to answer you, we cannot really tell what will happen come 2028. But the thing is, we really want to educate our people to choose our officials wisely, so that what gains that we'll be having with this administration will not be put into the drain. So that's one objective, to make our people be intelligent voters. Thank you.
French muna din ako. Thank you, Chino, for a very interesting question. I think we can no longer afford having a president who's going to set aside our fight in the West Philippine Sea. And I am very optimistic that the Filipino people right now, because of the transparency efforts that we're doing for over 2 years, have already made them fully aware that the West Philippine Sea should be an election issue in 2028. That this should be a concern for voters to smartly, cleverly identify who will be the next president of this country. We all know for a fact that the sitting president is the chief architect of our foreign policy. And since President Bongbong Marcos was elected with his first policy statement of not surrendering a square inch of our territory to any foreign power, that remains to be very strong. And we have to work so hard, double our efforts to once again get the support of the international community to make use of the 2016 Arbitral Award to leverage for our position. If we're going to have another president in the next 6 years after 2028, who's going to set aside our fight, was not going to engage the United States and even the European Union, and would still choose to go to China 5 times than any other president, I think that would be very bad for our fight. And that is something that will tremendously affect our position. Thank you.
Dr. Salim, and then Dr. Ben.
Well, thank you so much. I wouldn't dare to wait on the Philippines politics, especially as the French political situation is quite chaotic too. So, so yeah, maybe just to highlight that, unfortunately, we see a kind of crisis of democracies everywhere. Like mature democracies are now, fragmented, and this is only gaining, providing spaces and opportunities for malicious states to advance their own, game. And so we have seen a lot of interference also in the French politics. Now, I think the approach of the French government is changing a little. So we tend to be more also transparent about that, to attribute more the malicious facts when they are, and to communicate about it so that the public opinion also knows. So I think this is very important, to try to put light, to shed light on interference, and to have the public opinions knows about that, so that we can better, build a kind of all of society also cohesiveness and approach.
On my side, I would say that I was quite surprised when the Philippines started the transparency policy, and that was one of the reasons that led me to meet and discuss with Komodo Tayala about a year ago. And absolutely, and I felt Komodo Tayala has been quite unjustly criticized at some point about, that you think the transparency is everything, but that's something he never said. And there was this, and for me, the Marcos presidency, this ongoing one, was quite interesting in terms of how they tried to craft a balanced approach to the dispute. And it's not a concern. I'm just curious if the legacy of this presidency will be transferred to the new presidency, and if we can make it into a bipartisan, neutral approach that can be passed on for not just one term to another, but for decades, and increase and develop over time.
Yes, sir. Please, from the Coast Guard.
Sir, good morning. I'm Captain Baxena of the Maritime Security Law Enforcement Command of the Philippine Coast Guard. And for several years, we have been engaging in discussions, dialogue, and we have our transparency initiative. And as we can see, China is also doing its own South China Sea, China multilateral dialogue, making itself the hero of that
They're
discussion.
copying us.
Yes, yes, sir. So as a sir, as a policy direction for our maritime governance, how could we, or what should be our measures or countermeasures in the next strategy to make measures on how we counter their strategy?
Okay,
That's all.
countermeasures. Are we ready to sit down and talk to China now?
Well, actually, this is a propaganda war. Okay. For one, nobody believes China. Their rhetorics are actually directed towards their own people. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to engage, unfortunately, some of our kind in coming up with a China narrative, pro-China narrative. The thing is, we need to make our people aware of this deceptive or cognitive warfare campaign that China is waging. If you look into the information space, China's already dominated it. That's why they need to make our people aware of what this disinformation or misinformation are. Make our family, our our friends or even your children, because they are into this social media thing, they should be very aware. I mean, cognizant of what is lies, what are lies, and what are not. But the thing is, your own, we should be careful in telling your people, your friends, again, that you be entertain what are the Philippine narrative against this West Philippine Sea issue.
Okay, yes, sir. Please, Dr. Benjamin.
I wanted to add that one of the challenges that the Philippines, Malaysia, or Vietnam have toward China is that China really has a long-term approach to things. They don't mind spending decades to reach their objective, and they don't mind spending time, energy, and efforts. Just to give you a few numbers about the temporality of Chinese action, it took them from 25 years, from 49 to 74, to kick the Vietnamese out of the parasols, and they waited 25 years. Then between 2074 and 88, when they established themselves in the Spratlys, 14 years. And again, after that, 25 more years before the massive land reclamation. I mean, they go with the mindset of 25 years is okay. We don't mind. So they have taken 75 years or since today to establish the situation that they have. Sorry. So that's really one thing. It's not just a point of having a working strategy at point A. We need to maintain and evolve those strategies at the state level, at the same level that they play decades, and that's a really big issue.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Dr. Benjamin. We started our clash with China in 1995. It's like a 30-year marathon now. So maybe in the next 30 years, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and a final detail about that is very few people know that the Philippines and China negotiated a bilateral code of conduct before the global code of conduct.
Agree.
And if you are familiar with the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which says that when you enter into a negotiation willingly as a country, you have to behave in words and in actions with the spirit of the ongoing negotiation. And they have never done that. They've never done it for any single agreement that they've negotiated with the Philippines, with Vietnam, with Malaysia, with anyone.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, sir, please.
Good morning. One of the main economic impact of what's happening in West Philippine Sea is probably the price of energy in the country, because the Philippines cannot access to huge oil and gas resources in Reed Bank. 2 days ago, during a budget hearing, Secretary Lazaro disclosed that there were some early discussions between Chinese and Filipino companies for a joint exploitation of those resources. We know it happened in the past.
Yeah.
We know that there is a Supreme Court ruling in 2024 which states that it's impossible to bypass the 60% constitutional rule.
Yeah.
Do you still think there's a room for a joint exploitation in the West Philippine Sea of those resources? Thank you.
Very good question. So I think those are very important on energy security. So what can you say about that, Admiral? Sir.
Well, I'm somehow privy to the arrangements before. I've been with the Department of Energy during the past administration. Of course, there are challenges. One is on terminologies, because joint exploration cannot is violative of our constitution. So even the terminologies need to be addressed, and it is really very challenging on our part, because we tried, we attempted to proceed with our exploration activities. However, again, there are issues that have to be resolved. One is security issues, and because investments are big, it's a big ticket item. For example, no investor would like to shell out millions of dollars and only to be the project only to be scrapped later on. So those are issues that have to be resolved at the executive level, especially at the Department of Energy level and the security cluster, for example.
Yes, sir, you are recognized.
Hello, thank you. Evan Garcia, retired diplomat. I want to pick up on the comment about the Chinese time frame, because we have a problem. we Filipinos, we have this built-in mentality that we want to finish something within the term of a president or thinking like that. It is important that we do not have this, because in this game, the side that imposes an artificial time frame on itself has lost strategically. So in order to transition-proof this policy, you must take it out of this mindset of trying to finish something within 3 years or 5 years and find the mechanisms to sustain the effort. And the way to do that is to deepen and strengthen public awareness, as has already been said. But this requires money and effort. As was pointed out, the Chinese dominate the space. But this is not a question of armed force. The Philippines can also put more volume out. My God, we have so many news outlets and so many commentators. Let's use them, for something positive. It's not about guns. It's about messaging. Thank you.
Okay, Commodore, the phone microphone is there. Can you expound more on your?
Well, I agree with you, sir, as what Justice Carpus said. Our fight in the West Philippine Sea is intergenerational. This is actually well considered by the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea and even the National Maritime Council, knowing for a fact that the issue in the West Philippine Sea will not go away by 2028 or the moment that President Bongbong Marcos steps down and the next president succeeded him. Considering that as a very important objective for us to really fulfill when it comes to awareness. What we did right now, besides from the transparency that we're doing of, publicizing all the aggressive actions of China, we also came up with different ways to engage students from the universities, the local government units as well. But I think the most significant milestone that we did already is we were able to convince the Secretary of Education now to change the curriculum for the 4th grade, the 6th grade, and the 10th grade when it comes to social studies or araling panlipunan, whenever they talk about the geography, the current events, and the geopolitics. We made sure that the issue in the West Philippine Sea will be taught to the 4th grader about where the West Philippine Sea is. What is the position of, how are we going to support our position historically and all? So all of this are now already finalized at the Department of Education, and hopefully next year, this curriculum will already be given to those 4th grader, 6th grader, and 10th grader. I would also like to share with you, every time I give a talk to all the students in the universities, whenever you engage them, they appear like they are very well aware of the West Philippine Sea concern. But in point blank, if you ask them where the West Philippine Sea is, you will be surprised. Not everyone in the audience will be able to tell where the West Philippine Sea is. And the saddest part is whenever I ask them, as a member of the Filipino youth, the future of this country, do you believe that the West Philippine Sea is disputed? 8 out of 10 students would say, yes, West Philippine Sea is disputed. And this is the biggest problem that we have right now. Not the big Coast Guard vessels of the Chinese, not the big PLA Navy warships in the South China Sea, but our challenge right now is for us to continuously educate the younger generation, for them to understand what we are fighting for and why we're fighting for it. Thank you.
Right. That's very good because I have an upcoming textbook on politics and governance, and one chapter is allotted for the West Philippine Sea for the senior high school. But anyway, I just want to pick up about yeah. But Dr. Benjamin, you've been around the region. What would be the time frame of our neighbors when it comes to their China problem, and how are they going to resolve it? How do they see it basically?
I would say each country has its own strategy. Malaysia, Vietnam, or the Philippines have very, very different strategies. If I take Vietnam, because I think they are the most visible at the moment, they were very laying low for quite some time. But after a triple alignment of planet, they changed their strategy entirely. And when I say alignment of planet, let me explain. The first one was when they resisted China in 2014 and 2019 over those very massive naval incidents, when China tried to deploy this oil rig near Triton Island, and 5 years later when they tried to deploy an oil and gas exploration boat near Vanguard Bank. So after they resisted and actually repulsed the Chinese, that was the first thing. The second one was China to reorientate its attention toward the Philippines. And the third one was the COVID. And when those three things were aligned and there were much less boats in the Vietnamese area, then they started their land reclamation at a massive scale. And they didn't just reclaim one feature here, one feature there. They reclaimed 13 at a time, at the same time, so that the Chinese would try to impeach such or such convoy, but they could not impeach all of the convoys reaching their destination. And we have seen that now, now that we're in 2025, Vietnam has passed from 200 to 2,000 hectares of above water surface under their control. So 90% of what they have today didn't exist 3 years ago. So it demonstrates that when you have a will, when you put the resources, the political, financial, human, and technical resources together, you can really achieve something, and you can actually confront China, not militarily, not with a lethal force, but you can do it. There's ways to do it.
Okay. Other questions? Maybe I have one question for Dr. Celine and then a general question for all of you. Okay. Dr. Celine, as from a European perspective, what do you see as the key geopolitical risks of trade disruption in the Indo-Pacific? And in what ways can stronger Philippines-France cooperation help mitigate these risks and promote regional stability?
Well, we already discussed a lot about that, but yeah.
What's the bigger immediate threat that we are seeing now as we go on with that maritime governance in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, we see you're talking about trade and
Yeah.
so on. So we have several choke points, and of course the South China Sea, Strait of Malacca, and also the tensions in Taiwan Strait are very concerning for us, because any kind of disruption will really affect deeply our economy. There's more than 40% of the European trade that's going into the South China Sea. So that's why I think we were talking a little bit earlier about how the politics, domestic politics can, can infer on the priorities of the governments. But I do think that for France, looking at the Indo-Pacific, our interest will stay there. We have a deep economic interest. We have sovereignty interest as well, and that's why the cooperation with the Philippines is so important. It's a win-win kind of cooperation. We are deepening our knowledge, our understanding of what's going on in South China Sea, to have a better awareness of the situation, and we can also collaborate with the Philippines to reinforce the capacity, to reinforce the knowledge and the resilience of the country, and to push back on all challenges.
Okay. For the last question for all, because we're running out of time. You are very good when it comes to your sound bites. What would be the one word to strengthen maritime governance in the Indo-Pacific? From your answer. One word, each one of you.
One word is we need to be inclusive.
Okay, Commodore.
Transparency.
Okay, transparency. Dr. Pajon, what's your one word for this one?
Sure, coordination.
Coordination, very good, yeah.
Well, cooperation.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, our incredible speakers from the first session. Please.
So what was it? Inclusive, transparency, coordination, ITCC. We've now got a new acronym similar to ICAD: illegal, coercive, aggressive, deceptive. Now we've got ITCC. Thank you so much. Fantastic panel. Great insights from everyone. And thank you. Oh, hold on. Especially for Commodore J. Tardiela for driving home the message that the Philippines can no longer afford a leader who will set aside the WPS. Well, the WPS. I am supposed to call for a photo, and may we invite Ambassador Marie Fontanelle back on the stage along with Professor Dindo Manhit for a very quick photo. No, it's okay. Thank you also to our audience for your great, very sharp questions. Lots of takeaways from this first panel. Again, picked up some messaging around how we need to have a long-term strategy when it comes to China. China is of course playing the long game here. Go to Leonard. Go straight to break. Okay. We're gonna pause for a quick break now. There is coffee and hot beverages outside. And then we're gonna reconvene at about 11:25 for the next panel. So please grab some coffee, grab some colleagues, have a good chat, and then come back here by 11:25. Thank you. Okay, everyone, let's get started again. If you could all just take your seats, settle down. Please take your seats again. We're kicking off once again for the second part. Please settle down, take your seats, and we're kicking off again in 2 minutes. All right, I think we're ready. I just wanted to tell you a quick anecdote before we started up again, which is that whilst we were on break, I get a news alert on my phone, and it reads, a potentially catastrophic breach of US-based cybersecurity provider F5. Do you guys know F5? It's pretty big. F5 has been blamed on state-backed hackers from China. So that's pretty concerning. And, I mean, really underscoring the message that threats abound, right? They're all around us. It's relentless. And also underscoring some of the key messages from earlier. Dr. Blandon talked about how China was playing a long game and it took them 75 years to take over some of these key islands. And so in turn, Pacific states, island nations like the Philippines need to also evolve their strategies. And really, as one of the audience members said, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but you talked about transition proofing our strategies and our response to these external threats. I think that's going to be key here. And also, I thank you guys for your active participation in the discussion, and do also encourage you to raise your hands and ask your questions during the panel forum. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit for this next panel. It's titled Integrating Sustainability in Maritime Governance Frameworks. So we're talking about sustainability and looking into how that can be worked into maritime governance, making sure that we find the right balance between security, economic growth, and environmental protection, finding that sweet spot right there. So our speakers will also shed light on best practices and success stories that show how we can care for our oceans while supporting progress for communities that depend on them. So to kick off this conversation, we have with us a board member of the Private Sector Alliance for Disaster Resilient Societies, also known as ARISE, Alliance for Disaster Resilient Societies, ARISE Global. He also previously served as a flag officer in command of the Philippine Navy. So he's coming at it from both sides. So please give a warm welcome to retired Vice Admiral Alexander Pama.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. A good disaster resilient and sustainable morning to each and every one of you. And to start off, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, partners in maritime governance, ladies and gentlemen. Next slide, please. The ocean defines who we are as an archipelagic nation. It is our lifeline for trade, our frontier for resources, and our first line of defense. But as we confront the 21st century realities such as the climate change, illegal fishing, resource conflicts, and marine degradation, we realize that security and economic growth cannot be achieved without resilience and sustainability. True maritime power today is not measured by fleet size or port throughput alone. It is measured by how effectively we govern our seas, protecting marine ecosystems, while ensuring that commerce, livelihoods, and defense coexist in balance both within and beyond our national jurisdiction and done unilaterally or collectively in accord with our neighbors. Next slide. On governance challenge. Our maritime domain is complex. We must secure 3.4 million square kilometers of waters, defend our sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea and other areas, sustain fisheries for millions, and protect the marine biodiversity that anchors our blue economy. Yet, too often, these goals are pursued in isolation by various concerned agencies, defense in one lane, commerce in another, and conservation in a separate track. It is an imperative, therefore, that an integrated maritime governance framework leveraging on sustainability is undertaken. It recognizes that good stewardship of our seas is a matter of national security, economic stability, and ecological survival. Next slide. So how do we think we can embed sustainability in marine governance or maritime governance? First, we have to anchor our policies in international conventions and law agreements. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea remains our charter for the oceans. The recently ratified High Seas Treaty Agreement in Nice, France, strengthens it by protecting biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. We are likewise one of the active advocates and practitioners of relevant international agreements, such as but not limited to the Conference of Parties on Climate Change, or the COP21, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Global Compact for Sustainable Development, even as we likewise adhere to, comply, and advocate for the adoption of the provisions of other maritime conventions and treaties, such as the MARPOL and SOLAS, among others. By upholding these international instruments, the Philippines positions itself as an adherent to lawful activities for sustainable seas. The Philippines, serving as the Vice President of the recently United Nations Ocean Conference 3 plenary in Nice, France, in its official readout highlighted support for the marine environmental protection, adherence to international law, and advancing biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which emphasizes our alignment with the UNOC 3 political declaration. I would like to congratulate France for that very, very successful undertaking. Just to give France a big hand, please. The Republic of the Philippines now has a platform to align maritime governance, climate resiliency, and blue economy. Next slide. At this point, we also have to enact a National Blue Economy for Ocean Governance Act. The proposed Blue Economy Act right now in 20th Congress, Senate has a Senate Bill 881, and Congress has House Bill 2284. And this proposed Blue Economy Act will establish a legal and institutional framework for sustainable development of coastal and marine resources of the Philippines that will create an environment of cross-sectoral coordination and management. This can serve as a vital model for legislative frameworks that consolidate governance and create a predictable environment for marine security and economic development, as well as environmental protection. This will integrate fisheries, conservation, climate adaptation and resilience, and maritime security under one framework for sustainable and safe use and development of marine resources within our coastal and maritime domain. The main difference between the two is the Senate version is heavy on environment, and the House version is heavy on security. So personally, I'm a bit conflicted. I came from the security community, and I'm now doing resilience and sustainable businesses. Collectively, both will have mandates to formulate an integrated strategy to strengthen, grow, and sustain Philippines' blue economy, integrate marine coastal area management, and ecosystem-based management of coastal and marine resources. And the next slide. We have to institutionalize one of the most important things in maritime governance, which is the marine spatial planning. The use of MSP to separate or sequence use of shipping lanes, ports, fisheries, marine protected areas, renewable energy, tourism, and defense areas need to be identified and enforced. Built in monitoring and evaluation from day one. It has to be built and monitoring from day one so that we will be able to adopt plans that will not be in conflict with each other's agenda. Our efforts at resilience from our side will rely heavily on this for better maritime and marine environmental and augment its protection. Next slide, please. We have to build sustainability into security operations, making security and sustainability mutually supported. Blue economy depends on both. Our sustainable ocean is a secure ocean, and a secure ocean is a foundation for sustainability. It works vice versa, hand in hand. And both are the pillars of a resilient blue economy. It is in this area where Arise Philippines has been pushing the envelope, particularly for the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which is life below water. Next slide. Let's incentivize green growth. We need to push the envelope to encourage sustainable economic development in ocean-related industries. This can primarily be done through financial, policy, regulatory incentives, and other industry-friendly instruments. This may take the form of blue bonds, green port initiatives, tax breaks, and low-carbon emission practices for ecological compliant shipping to make sustainability profitable as well. Every peso invested in disaster prevention and resilience saves a lot more than in disaster recovery. Next slide. We have to balance economic growth and environmental protections as well. Embedding sustainability does not mean slowing growth. It means redefining growth. A sustainable blue economy ensures that fishing communities thrive within ecological limits, that shipyards transition to cleaner fuels, that tourism protects and not destroys, and that investors find value in renewable marine resources. When our maritime economy grows within the boundaries of nature, we safeguard it from collapse. Degradation of our coral reefs or mangroves is not only an environmental issue, it is a threat to our gross domestic product, our jobs, and even our food security, translated collectively to our national security. And as the climate crisis accelerates, sustainability becomes the ultimate form of security. Strong coastal ecosystems protect our ports, cities better than concrete seawalls ever could, not even flood control projects. Next slide. Now, regional and global responsibility. Beyond our maritime domain, the Philippines must help shape a new ocean governance architecture as a reasonable member of the international community. We ought to push for the Regional High Seas Treaty, or the BBNJ, cooperation in the ASEAN region as we advocate for regional monitoring networks, shared marine protected areas, and scientific collaboration. Our ratification of the High Seas Treaty in Nice and our strategic location in the region allows us to lead in the creation of our marine protected areas beyond our economic zone. We also have to advocate the ASEAN-wide maritime sustainability corridors, where safe navigation, green ports, and marine biodiversity protection converge. And this enhances both regional security and shared prosperity. Next slide. In closing, colleagues, the seas are our shared legacy and our shared responsibility. And we, in the environmental protection or environmental agenda, works closely with all the other sectors of society, both in the government, the private sector, and other sectors of society who, one way or another, has a vested interest, if I may say so, in an environment of maritime security. Embedding sustainability in maritime governance is not just a policy choice. It is a strategic necessity for a resilient archipelago. Let us govern our seas with wisdom, protect them with vigilance, and manage them with vision, so that generations after us will inherit not a battlefield of depleted waters, but a thriving, secure, and sustainable ocean. Embedding sustainability in maritime governance is not merely a moral imperative, it's a strategic investment in security, economic resilience, and ecological integrity. We in Arise Philippines and other stakeholders in the disaster risk reduction and resilience community stand in total support of this agenda. And our agenda involves voluminous or a lot of efforts being undertaken, which unfortunately I don't have the time to elaborate now. But then again, rest assured that the disaster resilience community is foursquare behind the agenda of a maritime domain that is very, very secure for our country and the region. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vice Admiral Pama. When Dindo asked me to host this forum, I jumped at the chance, thinking, for one day, I don't have to talk about the flood control projects. And now you just brought it back. All my trauma came back. But thank you for highlighting the very delicate balance we need to tread, right? You said you've got defense in one lane, you've got commerce in the other, and sustainability right down the middle. And that's exactly how it should be. But I think the sustainability bit always gets forgotten sometimes in the noise of it all. But thank you for reminding us of that. Okay, so moving on to the next speaker, we've got a geographer, a specialist in the Philippines and security issues in Southeast Asia. He is also an associate researcher at the Institute for Research on Contemporary, I think this is missing a word, on Contemporary Southeast Asia. Please give a warm round of applause for Mr. Francois Javier Bonnet.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much to be invited by the French Embassy and by Stratbase. I will talk about the topic which is quite sensitive, the topic of the undersea cables. Next, please. 99%, I will give you only a few statistics just to have just to see the strategic importance. 99% of internet communication pass through submarine cables and data centers. These are 450 submarine cables worldwide, including 44 in the China Sea. 8,000 data centers have been identified worldwide, including 2,700 in the United States. Asia has 877 data centers, including 415 in China alone, 120 of which are located in Hong Kong. Globally, the value of digital traffic carried by cables is estimated at $15 trillion. The United States accounts for 50% of the capacity of these infrastructures. Google owns 8% of internet infrastructure, including data centers. Next, please. So this is the traffic in the Pacific area. The northern part of the Pacific area is very dense, and the southern part of is less dense compared to the northern part. Next, please. The cables passing through the China Sea, the northern China Sea and the South China Sea. Next. 90% of cables are laid by three major companies: the European French Alcatel Submarine Networks, ASN, subsidiary of Nokia France, the US company Subcom, and Japan NEC. Each of these companies holds a 30% market share. China currently accounts for only 5% of the global submarine cable market. Huawei sold its Huawei Marine division to HMN, formerly Hengtong, 60 cable-laying ships worldwide, less than 10 by China. Next. But the geography of submarine cables could be disrupted by 2030 or even sooner. Since 2018 and the ban of Huawei by the United States, China has been using various means to prevent foreign cable companies from developing new cables in the South China Sea. However, on average, 2 cables need to be replaced each year. So by 2030, if China's policy remains unchanged, all cables crossing into the South China Sea will have been installed by the Chinese company HMN, flouting the traditional principle of submarine network neutrality in the region. This Chinese ban will result in the end of the direct communication between the United States and mainland Asia, as cable companies are now no longer allowed to access Hong Kong, a major regional internet hub. 2/3 of Chinese internet traffic passes through Hong Kong. Next. All new cables infrastructure projects with the segment connecting Hong Kong are therefore on hold. For example, the SGC2 and ATC cables, partially led by the Japanese group NEC, have still not received authorization to enter into service. It should have been operational in 2024. Next. This is the SGC2. Next. So you have now two irreconcilable perspectives. You have the perspective of China, only cables made in China can now cross the disputed 9-dash line zone and thus connect the countries bordering the China Sea to one another. And you have the perspective of the Quad, so Japan, United States, and Australia. The three routes, Singapore, Japan bypassing the 9-dash line, the second route, Japan, US, and the third route, Indo-Pacific, could only be built by the two main companies without bidding, NEC or Subcom. In the Pacific, Subcom is building 8 submarine cables for Google, crisscrossing the archipelagos of the Pacific Ocean through Hawaii, French Polynesia, Fiji, and Guam. The US Trade Development Agency is financing loans at near zero interest rates for the construction of a long sea crossing bypassing the China Seas by Subcom in order to further isolate China. Next. So here you have the South China Sea with the 9-dash line and all the cables. And all these cables will be step by step replaced by Chinese, made in China cables. Giving a quasi-monopoly to the Quad company, NEC and Subcom, to lay the cables in the Pacific, excluding the European company ASN by avoiding the bidding process, isolate countries like Vietnam, which are dependent of the South China Sea, increase on spying activities over data, slow down of the traffic, increase of cost, placing all communication in the Pacific archipelago under US control, and the loss of France's digital sovereignty in French Polynesia and New Caledonia to the exclusive benefits of the United States. All are the impact of this new polarization between China and the US. Next. So step by step, the South China Sea will become a Chinese lake, at least for the cable, in terms of cable. The South China Sea is claimed in whole or in part by 5 countries, including China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and the Philippines. China has the most extensive claim within the 9-dash line, an area covering 2/3 of the South China Sea. However, cable companies must obtain permits from the countries whose exclusive economic zones are crossed by the various projects. If one of the 5 countries refuses, the project is blocked. UNCLOS does not recognize the right of innocent passage to cable-laying ships. By blocking the granting of permits, China not only wants to ensure control of the region's submarine communication infrastructure, but also to control oceanographic, bathymetric, geological, and other data from the South China Sea, which is vital for the proper functioning of its fleet of nuclear and conventional submarines. Control of the strategic data has prompted China to ban marine surveys in the South China Sea and to develop its own fleet of cable-laying vessels. The first of these cable-laying vessels, the Tianhaigong, has been operational since 2020. So, towards a new geography of submarine cables, faced with the risk of a Chinese monopoly, other foreign operators will have to bypass the South China Sea and develop data centers other than the one in Hong Kong. Of the 44 cables, 22 are connected to Hong Kong. The Americans consider the Eastern Philippines, the city of Darwin, Australia, and East Timor as the future hubs of the Pacific, replacing Tokyo and Hong Kong. This detour will be costly and will slow down internet speed, 30% slower between Asia and the United States. Furthermore, this Chinese monopoly on cable laying will eventually operationalize the nice dashed line in the South China Sea. These are the cables avoiding the South China Sea, staying, in fact, along the coastal area and avoiding the nine dashed lines. In conclusion, since 2018, China has been using various means to prevent foreign cable companies from laying new cables in the South China Sea to counter the possible dual use of these cables. However, they can continue to maintain existing cables. By 2030, all new cables in the South China Sea will have been laid by the China company HMN. This will mark the end of direct traffic between North America and China, as the United States is now blocking cables connecting its territory directly to Hong Kong, through which 2/3 of Chinese internet traffic passes, while China is refusing non-Chinese cables connecting Hong Kong and other Chinese cities. The impact will be the power struggle for the control of the deep sea will intensify between the two superpowers in the decades to come. Some ASEAN countries will be disadvantaged, like Vietnam, which will have no choice but to use Chinese-made cables. Other countries, like the Philippines, may have an advantage as the archipelago as a facade, both on the South China Sea and on the Pacific. The probable winner will be Indonesia, as most of the cable projects will pass by this country. Singapore, the main hub in Southeast Asia, is already saturating, but will be even more solicited. ASEAN, as an institution, is conscious of the importance of the cables and has adopted a plan in 2019 to increase the cooperation between states and facilitate the reparation of cables in case of damages, notably by harmonizing and simplifying the procedures. But there is no collective plans yet on the protection of the cables, as the EEZ of these countries are mostly contested, notably in the South China Sea. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Monsieur Bonnet. Thank you for highlighting the importance of information security in all of this. What with 99%, as much as 99%, right? You said, of communications going through undersea cables. Okay, I'm gonna speed it up a little bit because we're slightly behind. Our next panelist is a lecturer from the University of the Philippines College of Law. He's also a legal officer at the Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea. Please give it up for Mr. Neil Silva.
Hello, Madame l'Ambassadeur, Mesdames et Messieurs, bonjour, and magandang umaga po. And to our other friends listening, ni hao. Okay, okay. So I was asked to talk about maritime governance, which is a welcome change. I normally talk about maritime security, but there will be an inevitable security discussion here as well. I would like to start with the map. Kindly note the location of the Philippines within this area. People tend to mistakenly say that the Philippines is only a Southeast Asian country, which it most certainly is not. The Philippines is a Southeast Asian country and therefore shares the problems of our Southeast Asian neighbors. For example, Jemaah Islamiyah used to be very active and therefore infected as well southern Philippines. At the same time, however, we are a Northeast Asian country as well, and we share Northeast Asian problems, including, for example, the proximity of Taiwan, among other issues. But we are also a Pacific Island country, and therefore we share Pacific Island problems, including, for example, the prevalence of typhoons and natural disasters as our leading national security threat. So these are the things we need to be aware of when we are talking about maritime governance in the Philippines, that we are, in fact, in many ways, a trifecta of regions, and therefore a trifecta of problems. Next slide, please. Okay, first of all, just by way of introduction, I come from the Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea, which is part of the UP Law Center, which is the official legal think tank of the Philippine government. Next slide. Most of my work there is on security and defense cooperation, but also fisheries governance as well. I have lectured on these matters before groups like Indo-Pacific, NATO, and recently in India for the National Maritime Foundation. Next slide. Everything I say is my own personal opinion. Next slide. So this will have a two-part thing, since I only have 7 minutes. Number one is to talk about theoretical considerations. By theoretical, actually, it means negotiations. When you are negotiating an agreement, what do you need to think of? And then number two, and when that I'm delving on my own experiences, having worked on the negotiation of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement and the ASEAN Convention on Trafficking in Persons, among other agreements. The second part will be a practical laundry list of problems, knowing that it's only a foundation for what will come after. Next slide. So let's start with this. When we are talking about marine governance norms, it is inevitably a balancing act. A norm can be more specific, in which case it becomes a rule, or it becomes less specific, in which case it is only a standard or a principle. A norm can be more substantive, which means it is demanding more from the persons who are governed by the area, or it may be demanding less. And if it demands more, and if it is more specific, it is potentially the most effective norm at instilling the kind of change in behavior you want and getting your outcomes. But it will be politically most difficult. The politically easiest thing to achieve is something that is, quite frankly, least demanding or least particular. Next slide. And this, by the way, somewhat corresponds to the regime types pointed out by the political scientist Dr. Oran Yang, who divided regimes into something that's either generative, something to make principles and make norms, programmatic, something for common action, procedural, wherein entities and governed entities are supposed to follow a certain set of steps, and then, frankly, regulatory, because it is requiring certain conduct and behavior. This is part of the give and take, of course, the give and take, and also the balancing act of negotiating something to be mindful of, because part of our marine governance work right now is actually building norms, not only instituting, implementing current ones. Next slide. So, for example, let's apply this to the current norms we have. The IUUF, right now, the IUUF framework globally is very much a programmatic norm. It is based on common action, but the regulatory framework is rather weak. For example, it is based on targets like MSY and TCA, which are quite frankly up to each country to undertake. And I will, and then the current draft articles on protection disasters, for example, is very programmatic and generative. It says countries must allow for assistance without must not arbitrarily deny assistance, but at the same time it says unless otherwise necessary. So it's again very quite indefinite. And in between is the agreement on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which, as you note, is actually very much a generative agreement. It's an agreement to agree further, to talk about the creation of the financial mechanism and the benefit sharing mechanism, to institute the financial committee, among others, in order to actually build further norms. Okay, next slide. Okay, great. Can you go back to the first slide? Okay, this is something to be mindful of, for example, when we are negotiating things like the plastic treaty and, for example, the code of conduct in the South China Sea. The easier it is to build one, the weaker it will be. Basically, that's it. So, for example, the current DOC, for example, has elements of something programmatic on maritime economy, but it also has instruments of procedure, coordination rather than substantive norms. These are things to be mindful of as negotiate further maritime governance frameworks. Next slide. So, on to the laundry list. Next slide. First of all, the problem of IUF is really the problem of overlapping jurisdictions, port state jurisdictions, for example, to be implemented the Port State Measures Agreement. You have flag state jurisdiction, jurisdiction in the high seas, as well as coastal state jurisdiction. You can see this, for example, is the Arctic Sunrise case. However you feel about Russia, the fact is it affirmed flag state jurisdiction as something higher than coastal state jurisdiction. Next slide, please. And this is not just a problem internationally, but also domestically, because these are the 4 agencies with floating assets in the Philippines, not including the ones without floating assets. And all of them, again, have overlapping subject matter enforcement jurisdiction when it comes to fisheries, environment, and other offenses, namely the Philippine Navy under the Administrative Code, the Philippine National Police under Republic Act 6975, the Philippine Coast Guard under Republic Act 9993, and the Bureau of Fisheries under the Fisheries Code as amended. Next slide. Another thing to consider is the fact, again, the South China Sea, part of the laundry list. The South China Sea is really a governance issue as well, because we are all aware of the territorial and maritime disputes. But these territorial and maritime disputes are made complex by, on the lower left, lower right quadrant, the geopolitical and security and economic issues, and on the lower right quadrant, the problem of international rules-based governance, especially when China is positioning itself as a revisionist power, intending to quote-unquote avenge the century of national humiliation, and also, according to President Xi Jinping, to be a key participant in the change of international norms. Again, this is what makes our issue more complicated. Next slide. And then domestic legal developments, I would like to highlight. Number one, we have new laws, the Maritime Zones Act and the Archipelagic Sea Lanes Law, which need to be implemented and effectively through implementing guidelines. The PENCAS Act on the measurement of the value of our environmental assets, and then further judicial decisions such as Ocampo versus Macapagal Arroyo, which declared void the joint marine seismic undertaking and tightened the rules governing governing resource exploration agreements as opposed to scientific agreements, something to be mindful of for marine scientific research projects in the future. Province of Sulu Medialdea, which split Sulu from BARM and therefore affected, for example, the future border of the zones of joint cooperation between the central government and the Bangsamoro government. And Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources versus Melquidar, which declared invalid the municipal waters norm under the Fisheries Code, and therefore, again, somewhat muddied the waters concerning the respective jurisdiction of the BIFAR and the municipal governments concerning municipal waters. All of these are practical governance developments which will then require a resumption of norm creation frameworks, which we have to consider again, going to the first part, as to what is the balancing act between something effective and something politically easy to do. Next slide. And finally, we are not alone. This is a map of the security framework, but this is a security framework that is also a governance framework. The big rectangle is the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation of 1976. That includes, for example, France and the Philippines, which, by the way, are still treaty allies under the Southeast Asia Collective Treaty Agreement, the Seattle Agreement, which was actually affirmed by the Ministry of Defense of France back in 2014, if I remember correctly, as one of the agreements that still bind us. Again, this is a framework which we can leverage in order not only to secure our borders, but also to enhance our governance issues on natural disasters, humanitarian and disaster relief, among others. By the way, this is the FARANZ, for example, is the so-called France arrangement concerning disaster relief and disaster management, which is again relevant for the Philippines because of our situation as a trifecta of problems in the Western Pacific. Next slide. So that concludes my brief presentation. Thank you very much. Back to the
Thank you so much, Professor Silva. It's the first time I've heard the Philippines been described as a trifecta of challenges. And I'll also try to remember what you said about the easier it is to build a framework, the weaker it'll be. So I guess at this point, the ASEAN Code of Conduct should be ironclad, I guess. It's taken 20 years, but never mind what I said. Next up, we've got the co-convener of the Atin Ito Coalition. He is here to share his knowledge and also his experience. Please welcome Mr. Edicio de la Torre. I said. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would have given, if we were allowed give our minutes, I would have given it to the professor. I've learned so much from you and also from the undersea cable. My gosh, I didn't realize that. Anyway, I don't know why I was asked to speak, but I'm supposed to speak a bit about the experience of the civilian coalition campaigning on the West Philippine Sea, which we call Atin Ito. It's ours. Interesting note, Dindo, it was at a straight-based conference in 2023 where I and a couple of other activists were saying, can't we do something and not just leave it to government and policymakers? And it was from there that the seed was born, and we thought, okay, let's do a Christmas gift giving in Palawan. Now, I was brought there the groups politically were more associated with Akbayan and other groups, no? But I was brought there and invited because that time I was the president of the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement, which for those who don't know it, you should not know it, it's not well known, was established in 1952. Of all, ironically, because it was James Yen, a Chinese, who after the Chinese Revolution won, had to leave China, went to Taiwan, went to the US, and started it in the Philippines with Dr. Conrado Benitez. No? So why do I say that? Because to start that, I said, look, rural development in the Philippines is always land-centric. No? In the Miss Universe contest, how many islands are there in the Philippines, lowland or highland? We don't think of the 2.2 exclusive economic zone, or as Admiral said, 3.4, no? So we launched an initial conference where we invited the UP Marine Science Institute, and we called it Mana Natin. Maritime and archipelagic nation, and play on words, mana is also heritage, natin, our heritage. That is where the first idea came in, although it started geopolitical sovereignty. Environment from the beginning was a crucial issue. How do we sustain not just fish, corals, and all of it, especially livelihoods of our coastal communities? Anyway, from there, we said, okay, let's start something. And we immediately ran into an initial bit of trouble because we announced that we are going on a civilian mission to assert, from a civilian point of view, peacefully, the rights of the Philippines to the West Philippine Sea. And of course, publicly, the National Security Council told us, step down, you don't want to provoke China. Because I think the implicit suspicion, which is, I think, what I could contribute here is, activists tend to be, no matter how valid the issue, that it will be meant to embarrass government. I used to say that non-NGO, the old name of civil society, used to be, should be called really AGO, what? Anti-government organization. We are critical on issues, but basically we're politically critical, if not aspiring to be an alternative government, supporting alternative. But then, over time, and I think that is the first good news I want to, we got invited to the National Security Council, we had all kinds of discussions, and we arrived at a realization that rarely in our history have civil society, NGO, anti-government organizations have come to a unity and an agreement, not just tactical, but strategic, with government, or at least this particularly, the government of the day. But not just based on the relation, but there is this reference to international agreement. So I am reminded, my background, for those who don't know me at all, I used to be a Catholic priest. My first involvement was a chaplain of the Federation of Free Farmers on agrarian reform. But then martial law came, and so I had to go underground. Not very good at it, so I was arrested twice and spent 9 years in prison. If you want a consultant for prison architecture, I can support you. But the learning I want to say is, I learned then that any movement for change, any acceptable aspirational movement for change must be able to combine the power of principle and the principle of power, which is where I want to address. Now, what is the power of principle that we bring to it? The whole point of bringing the environment adds a deeper strategic principle to the issue of governance, sovereignty, and all that. No? For a long, long while, especially from the Catholic tradition, the doctrine of preferential option for the poor is always social justice for the poor, the oppressed. It was Pope Francis who brought in, with Laudato Si, integrating the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. So environment became much bigger. Even in the Philippine rural reconstruction movement, which started with fourfold approach, literacy against ignorance, health against disease, livelihood for against poverty, and governance against civic apathy. After 92, we brought in the whole point of environment, sustainability. But for a long, long while, most civil society organizations are more into the social, the political, and all that. So I think it's still a continuing challenge how to give environment something that is beyond the kind of a it's for everyone. I mean, there is conflict there. There is real politics that will be involved, and we have to address that when we communicate why we have to integrate environment and sustainability into governance. Now, from there, I think the power of principle tends to be in the language of civil society and all that. That's why I like your point about the law. It's always moral, philosophical even. But in the end, like human rights, if it doesn't translate into citizens' rights, how will it be enforced? It's law that is enforceable. And that is why I think the translation of moral, philosophical, whatever rights should be embedded in law. And I didn't realize it's so complicated, that they're easier. But I think that is one of the challenges to us in this forum. Now, the other issue is, what about the principle of power? And we had to address that. Who are we? NGOs in the Philippines, civil society, in the heyday of post-EDSA 86, we were like the darlings of not just the world, but even funding agencies. But now, civil society has shrunk in terms of capacity, sometimes even in terms of cutting-edge thinking, initiatives, and we realized, hey, there used to be an overemphasis by ourselves, I guess, that, oh, well, government is about power, market is about profit, we are the pure. And they said, no, no, we're all human beings with our respective interests, and let us calculate actively, accurately, where does our power lie, and how do we maximize it? And so where is our power? When we were discussing with the National Security Council that this will be a civilian initiative, we don't want to be associated and confused with military and security issues. They say, Ed, we understand you, but the Chinese will never believe you. There are no independent citizens initiatives there. But we try as much as possible, although we collaborate, we coordinate with government, with some private sector who say, we'll help you, but please keep it quiet because we have businesses there. But they do help. How do you assert independence and yet have power? Well, one is, and I think that's the reason you invited me, is the competition for attention. Right now, one of the scarcest resources in the world is attention, especially with daily streaming and there's so many things. Where do you pay attention to? Without focus, it won't happen. And attention is not just a matter of facts and rationality. Attention, if we would revise the old Aristotelian concept of human beings are rational animals, no, we are rationalizing animals. There are emotions and all that, but we have to rationalize it against frameworks, ideas that people will share. And that is where I locate our welcome initiative to say, look, we have to integrate environment, concern for the environment, not just in our exclusive economic zone, but as part of shared commons that is acceptable and valuable to the world. I'm supposed to wrap up, which means I'll wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. De La Torre. I felt so bad cutting him off because it felt like sitting in church listening to a homily, a lecture. Sir, it's not too late to go back to the clergy. You still have it in you. Okay. Thank you for talking about the power of principle and the principle of power, by the way. And finally, for this round, we've got a spokesperson for the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, or BFAR, Mr. Nazario Briguera. Mr. Briguera, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, friends from the Embassy of France, the Strat-based Institute, guests from the diplomatic community, government agencies, academe, civil society, and the private sector. Good afternoon, everyone. Allow me to begin by expressing our appreciation to the Embassy of France and the Strat-based Institute for convening this Blue Talks series. This initiative has become a critical space for meaningful knowledge exchange and collaboration. It demonstrates the vision of our two nations of a sustainable and rule-based maritime order that is indispensable for peace, prosperity, and resilience in the Indo-Pacific. The Philippines holds immense potential to advance sustainable blue economy, which harnesses the wealth of our oceans to drive economic growth while ensuring ecological balance and social equity. As one of the world's most biodiverse archipelagos, the Philippines boasts over 36,000 kilometers of coastline and is home to about 70% of the world's coral species and more than 2,000 species of fish. These ecosystems play a vital role in sustaining national fishery productivity through their unique ocean dynamics and ecological connectivity. Unfortunately, these same waters are among the most threatened, increasingly encroached upon by foreign flag vessels engaged in illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, particularly in the western part of our exclusive economic zone. The West Philippine Sea, or WPS, is a critical marine bioregion that hosts around 30% of our country's coral reefs. IUF undermines sustainable management efforts, compromises biodiversity, and worsens the vulnerability of our small-scale fishers, the backbone of our coastal economy. They are felt daily by communities whose livelihoods depend on the sea, communities that find themselves unable to access the traditional fishing grounds and who return home with smaller catches for their families. The Global IU Fishing Index in 2023 ranks the Philippines 53rd among 152 countries most at risk. Data for the Philippine IU Fishing Report 2023 estimate that more than 107,000 metric tons of fish catch in municipal waters are linked to IUUF, translating to annual economic losses of around 5.4 billion pesos in municipal waters alone. These losses directly threaten the livelihoods of over 2.3 million registered municipal fishers, while also heightening regional tensions as foreign fishing fleets continue to encroach upon our exclusive economic zone and territorial sea. Destructive practices such as blast and cyanide fishing and the use of fine mesh nets further degrade coral reefs and vital habitats, endangering marine species and upsetting the ecological balance. This environmental decline also weakens the ocean's natural capacity to absorb carbon, making us more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Moreover, IUU fishing drives overexploitation and depletion of key fish stocks. As fish supply dwindles, prices rise, making this once affordable source of protein increasingly inaccessible to millions of Filipino families. IUU fishing is therefore an environmental, economic, and security issue. The DBFAR responses on sustainable maritime governance. The Philippine government, through the DABFAR, is responding through a combination of legal, institutional, technological, and community-based measures. Our policy foundation rests on the amended Fisheries Code and a suite of fisheries administrative orders that operationalize science-based management, enforcement, and conservation. Among this, Fisheries Administrative Order number 263 established Fisheries Management Areas, or FMAs, a landmark reform that divides the country's waters into 12 management zones, each governed through participatory and science-based mechanism. We have also adopted national plans that align with global standards. For one, we have the National Plan of Action to Prevent, Deter, and Eliminate IUU Fishing, or NPOA IUUF. the National Plan of Action for Small-Scale Fisheries, or NPOA SSF 2024, the first in Asia, developed in partnership with the UN FAO. We also have the NPOA for the conservation and management of sharks and rays. To strengthen local fisheries management, BFAR, with support from USAID, developed the IFIT tool, a suite designed to help LGUs assess the status of IU fishing in their areas. IFIT allows local government units to identify targeted solutions and track progress in eliminating illegal activities. It equips them with data-driven insights to enhance coastal and fisheries management programs. It is customized to the local context to provide relevant, measurable, and Philippines-specific indicators to assess the prevalence of IU fishing in a given area, that area's vulnerability to IU fishing, and the government's response to the problem. The tool was originally designed for use in municipal waters, but a version for commercial fishing vessels has been developed. BFAR has significantly enhanced its monitoring, control, and surveillance systems through the establishment of the Integrated Marine Environment Monitoring Systems, or IMEMS, a state-of-the-art facility that integrates satellite data, vessel monitoring systems, and automatic identification systems to monitor vessel movement in real time. We also implement the Port State Measures Agreement, or PSMA, which denies port entry and services to vessels engaged in IUUF. Four designated PSMA ports, Davao, General Santos, Navotas, and Subic Bay, are now operational, aligning the Philippines with international best practices under the FAO. BFAR works closely with the Philippine Coast Guard, the Navy, and local law enforcement units to conduct joint patrols and enforcement operations, especially in the West Philippine Sea and other high-risk zones. We collaborate with the ALG and LGUs for the rollout of the IFIT tool. Internationally, we collaborate with Global Fishing Watch, NOAA Fisheries Ocean Mine, CIFDEC, WCPFC, FAO, and other organizations to share data, harmonize monitoring systems, and strengthen compliance with international standards. In 2023, BFAR launched the Livelihood Activities to enhance fisheries yields and economic gains from the West Philippine Sea, or LAYAG WPS program, with an initial funding of 80 million pesos. The program provides alternative livelihoods, capacity building, and equipment to support Filipino fishers affected by declining access to traditional fishing grounds due to maritime challenges. Moreover, in 2024, the DABFAR has allotted a budget of 1.8 billion pesos to intensify monitoring, control, and surveillance activities and improve management of fishers and aquatic resources in the West Philippine Sea. This includes procurement of 2 units of 50-meter steel-hulled multi-mission offshore vessels and 1 unit 80-meter steel-hulled multi-purpose refrigerated cargo vessel. BFAR continues to widen collaboration and incentivize local innovation. We have the Malinis at Masaganang Karagatan Program, or Clean and Abundant Seas. MMK is an incentive-based mechanism that recognizes and rewards coastal municipalities for excellence in sustainable fisheries management. Through the MMK, BFAR evaluates local government based on criteria such as the absence of illegal fishing, the observance of closed fishing seasons, the presence of marine sanctuaries, and effective enforcement of local fishery ordinances. Winning municipalities receive infrastructure and livelihood projects. The MMK program encourages positive competition among LGUs and creates a ripple effect of accountability, innovation, and environmental stewardship at the local level. The Bantay Dagat Insurance Program provides life and accident insurance coverage to volunteer coastal law enforcers, or Bantay Dagat, guardians of the sea. We also strengthen fisheries and aquatic resources management councils, which aim to enhance fisherfolk empowerment by involving them in decision-making processes related to fisheries governance. This is achieved through meaningful collaboration in resource management, development, and conservation. Pharmacies operate at multiple levels, from the national to the barangay, to address localized and broader fisheries issues. The responsibilities include: one, supporting the enforcement of fishery laws and ordinances, and two, preparing proposals to conserve and rehabilitating aquatic resources and ecosystem. Moving forward, the DAB-FAR will continue to expand the use of advanced tools to monitor fishing activities beyond municipal waters, strengthen the skills and capacity of our regional offices, and implement the IFIT process across all fisheries management areas. We also envision a whole of government and whole of society approach to fisheries governance, recognizing that our oceans connect us all. Through initiatives like this Blue Talk series and through long-standing partnership with various institutions, we reaffirm our commitment to a rule-based, cooperative, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. On behalf of the DAB-FAR, maraming salamat, and may this dialogue inspire deeper partnership between France and the Philippines and all nations committed to a shared responsibility for the seas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bruguera. Please stay on the stage because let's slide right into the next panel because we're a little behind. I take away a new acronym, IUUF, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And without further ado, let's open up the next and final panel for today. Let me bring up on the stage again, Vice Admiral Alexander Pama, Mr. Francois Javier Bonet, Professor Neil Silva, Mr. Ed De La Torre, and of course, Mr. Nazario Briguera. And to lead the conversation, we will be joined by Mr. Ludwig Federigan. He's a non-resident fellow of the Strat-Based Institute and founder and chief strategic advisor of the Young Environmental Program. Oh, you wanted Ed? You wanted Oh, it's all down.
All gentlemen. Good afternoon. First, I want to apologize. We are the panel between now and, of course, if you are already hungry for your lunch. Second, I also apologize. It's not my making. We have an all-men panel here, so we are not gender balanced. So all women out there, please don't strike. So we have here a very diverse panel who have the talk about various topics. No? So I wanted to throw the first question, of course, to our first speaker, to Vice Admiral Pama. No? My first question to Vice Admiral Pama, actually, I wanted to borrow that quote that you made from Dr. Jose Rizal. He who wishes to secure the future must cultivate the present. No, Vice Admiral, given your experience in disaster resilience, no, how can we integrate climate change adaptation and disaster preparedness into maritime governance framework to ensure long-term sustainability?
Well, thank you very much for that very good question. The answer definitely is complicated. And in the interest of time, I'll try to minimize it. But as I was mentioning earlier in the briefing, we cannot have sustainability or security without inputting the principles of disaster risk reduction and resilience. One clear example is, for example, one of the targets that we have, just a very, very tactical example. One of the main issues that we have a problem so far as the oceans are concerned is, for example, the plastics. When we talk of the plastics, it's one thing that's affecting a lot both the life undersea, which is the target of SD14, and even the destruction of other resources. We cannot address that issue alone, for example, with just getting the garbage in the ocean. The solution to that is a ridge to reef solution on disaster risk reduction and resilience, because all these plastics come from the inland. So on the aspect of that, it is both a question of preventing disasters, not only on land, but even at sea. And even in the preventing disasters, we're talking here of not only the environment, but as well as the ships that go around it, the pollution and the accidents, the regulations that need to be enforced. And all these things basically are all connected. And even when you say in the climate change, we now have in government the National Climate Change Action Plan. But the challenge again is in the implementation because it needs the cooperation and participation of the different sectors of society, not just the government. So the challenge is the whole of society approach. So we cannot have a sustainable and a blue economy without enforcing disaster risk reduction and resilience. Both come together. They're practically two sides of the same coin. Without that, one can never be achieved. That's why it's very, very imperative that these two bills now will have to be reconciled so that we will have a local framework. We have more than enough frameworks internationally. And all of this includes disaster resilience, sustainability. In fact, the one specific sustainable development goal, the 14, the pin that you're wearing is life below sea. And we cannot achieve that goal if we cannot address the things above the sea. And disaster resilience is one of the primordial things that we have to address.
Yeah. Just a follow-up, you mentioned two bills. You're pertaining to the Blue Economy Bill.
Yeah, there's a blue economy bill in Senate right now. Actually, this was already presented in the 19th Congress, but it did not pass. And thank you for asking that question because there's two big differences in this bill. We are monitoring it from the perspective of disaster resilience and environment. The Senate version right now, which I think I forgot the number, na SM po ako, senior moment. The Senate version is heavy on environment and disasters. And that's where my current business, if you may, right now. The other version, which I think Admiral Lopez would be very, very happy, the House version wants to build on the National Maritime Council. The security plays a big factor in that. So I think talking about these two bills now, we hope that the blue economy or the Oceans Act that will come out is a synergy and a combination of these two. Because we were saying earlier, relative to the question, we cannot have sustainability, we cannot have blue economy without looking at the security side of it. So hopefully the bill that would come out, and talking about the bill, because even us in the environment, disaster resilience community, on a personal note, my heart belongs to this now. It can work both ways because I was in the military, in the Navy for so long.
Now you have it.
Yeah, and modesty aside, I can say I was one of the authors of the National Coast Watch system. So my heart belongs there originally. Now I'm with the disaster resilience and environment. So but my position now is it's all of the above. It cannot be neither or. So the bill, when it becomes law, should be covering both of these aspects. Otherwise, we will not have a good blue economy. We cannot have a sustainable maritime domain.
Thank you. Very insightful. Let me just jump to Mr. Neil Silva. Yusek Palma mentioned about plastic. And a few years back, the Philippines just adopted the Extended Producer Responsibility Law. No? Using the framework that you just mentioned a while ago, where whether we are potentially most effective or easiest to establish, how would you place the EPR law in this particular framework?
I would have to regret that I am not that familiar with a law, to be honest. Insofar as that's concerned, but I would locate it. I'm familiar with the other environmental laws, so I will locate it on also the larger environmental legislation we have because we have a lot. We have the Maritime Pollution Decree, with which I'm more familiar because of its enforcement in law enforcement aspect, as well as, for example, the habitat protection under the Wildlife Protection Law. And insofar as those are concerned, those are actually very strong regulatory frameworks insofar as they're concerned. For example, I think the Fisheries Code was already strong in 1998. We strengthened it further with in 2015, 2016, when we added, for example, a lot of the IUF related provisions, we in fact increased the penalties and created admin penalties for them as well. So insofar as they are concerned, I think they are quite strong because there was a strong commitment, for example, to making sure the Philippines had a strong regulatory framework. We now have the next problem, and the next problem is really implementation. And implementation, of course, has three phases. Number one is having the standards that you will implement, and then number two, having the resources, allocating resources for implementation commensurate to the problem and to the size of our waters, and then number three would be having the expertise. And having the expertise in terms of human resources for all of those. That is really a challenge for us, but no doubt a problem as well for all other countries which are maritime because of the very large waters that we have to protect. And this is why actually France actually is one of the models for this, because France is an Indo-Pacific power and also faces large challenges and cooperates a lot with its neighbors, for example, and other Pacific countries have shipwrighter agreements as well, in which they cooperate, for example, on monitoring their various waters. So again, I cannot answer on the plastic side, but on the larger side, I can answer on the fact that we are facing not insurmountable challenges, but very real challenges that require political commitment and above all, allocation of sufficient resources to respond to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Bonet. You've shown us the challenges of the submarine cables installation in the Asia Pacific, and the way I look at it, it posed critical importance to these countries. No, is there any opportunity that you can say that would connect into sustainable marine governance out of these challenges that you presented?
The most important is to be able to manage, to monitor the activities around the cable. And so we go back to the MDA, to the maritime domain awareness. That's really a key aspect. And in this particular aspect, France can also bring its knowledge with the ASN and the French Navy. They are used to monitor their own cable. But we have to know that the Chinese, when they lay the cables, inside the cables, you have a part which is military. And so, for example, there was a cable going to the south of France. The objective was to pass by Marseille, the southern part of France, and to go after that to Italy and to different places in Europe. And for a long period, the government of France blocked the laying of this cable because the intelligence from Pakistan explained that you have inside this cable, all the cables made by Chinese, you have this spying part. And so, but at the end, the French government accepted to have this cable because they said the DGSE, the French intelligence, said we can manage. We know that there is a spying aspect, but we can manage to control, especially at the station. It's where the problems are happening. It's not the pipe itself, but it's at the station, the reception of the station. So now we have this kind of.
Thank you for that insight.
So the importance is really to be able to monitor the stations and the cables.
Thank you. When we start talking about whole of society approach, of course, we have to put into the picture the civil society, the critical importance of the civil society. In atin ito, Father, Mr. De La Torre, sorry, no? Recently, atin ito had a concert in the West Philippine Sea. No? Do you think that the messaging of the concert and all other activities of the civil society in the West Philippine Sea resonates enough to the entire Filipino people?
Well, we would hope so, but we are also honest. It takes a while for a message to come across, not because it's not clear. It's because of the next message. what can we do? We just make noise. And again, so I think the issue, I said, of the power of principle is there. It's easy to convince people. Where does our power lie? What leverage do we have? And that's where I agree with. We have to take a long-term view of this. The Chinese have been teaching. I mean, Ambassador Chito Santa Romani used to be our board member. He says, Ed, the whole issue of 100 years of humiliation, they frame even what we are doing as the Philippines participating in a Western reaction to continue. So we have to be aware of that. There are other messages. You're not saying, but it's there. So it's important that people overcome the sense of helplessness and you achieve some victories. So I think calling attention, getting away with doing something on the West Philippine Sea, holding a concert there, getting, by the time, by the way, a Vietnamese singer was supposed to come, only she had an operation because we had a Malaysian, we had an Indonesian, so it's not just Philippines. So I think the whole issue of creating certain, call it communicative action, including concerts, are important. But there's a tendency also in civil society or in general and government to think it's a matter of giving the facts and invoking the law. You have to address emotions. You have to address calculations of will it go anywhere or we're just asking for further trouble to ourselves. But I would like to reinforce this whole issue of we must take a long-term view, do what we can in the period. I look to next year for those who like a long-term view. Next year is 40 years after EDSA. 40 years. What have we got there? And I think that's important to say, what have we learned? And one thing we have learned is you don't always have to be against government to achieve something useful. A civil society should be able to engage with the government of the day, with its limitations and its possibilities. More limitations in the previous administration, more possibilities in this administration. In the next, I don't know. That's beyond our control. What is within our control is we build our capacity as citizens, in schools, in institutions, in media, and then find some ways to engage. I guess that's what we've learned after so many years. I've been an activist for, I don't know, half a decade.
But Father, I applaud that particular concert because me, for example, I believe that sustained awareness increases the capacity, of every Filipino. To our friend in and before, if you were to identify one or two concrete steps for the cooperation between Philippines and France, in the next 5 years, what would you have, concrete steps between the cooperation between Philippines and France?
In terms of maritime governance?
Yes.
Yes. I think there are opportunities for these two nations in terms of improving our maritime governance. For example, these two nations can actually work together in terms of improving our policy environment, and also come up with specific strategies in terms of delivering more improved interventions for the fisher folk who are actually frontliners in terms of maritime governance. So I think these are two areas where these two nations can actually collaborate in terms of having sound, effective maritime governance or fisheries management.
Thank you. I'm now opening the floor for questions from the audience. Do you have any questions from our experts in the panel? Yes, sir.
Good noon, everyone, and thank you very much for all your presentations. That was a very interesting presentation on the cables, and it just reminded me that in the last few months in Europe, there were cables that were cut in the nearby Nordic coastlines, and the presence of Chinese ships and Russian ships were very suspect. In the scenarios that we have here in our own neighborhood, would you say that that would be an indication of a near imminent kinetic activity when cables are cut and the prelude of an attack on Taiwan as a possibility of the next thing?
At least the Taiwanese are taking it very seriously because they know that very quickly the Chinese will cut the cables around the island. And so now they avoid to use, they complement the cables by satellite communications for around 27 high-ranking level people who can continue to communicate even if there is no more cables. And they avoided the Starlink because they know that the Starlink can be unreliable. Sometimes they can stop continuing sending the signal, so they are creating their own system. So it's one signal, it's one possibility when you cut not only one but several of the cables, it can be a signal that of hostilities soon.
Oh, there is a sharing from Mr. Silva.
I would like to add to Monsieur Bonet, whose article, by the way, on Scarborough Shoal is essential reading for all Filipinos. I would like to note that. Sir, the question is whether or not it would be a sign. Actually, they're already cutting the cables. There are already accidental cutting of cables in northern Taiwan. And does it indicate an imminent kinetic threat? Maybe, maybe not. It's really hard to tell. You can, for example, look at the Eastern European situation. There was a severing of cables in the Baltic Sea. There are, before that, in the 2000s, there was the Estonian cyber attack, for example, in Estonia around 2006, 2005. There were also attacks on financial institution and infrastructure in Ukraine, but Estonia was not followed up with a kinetic attack. Ukraine was not immediately followed up with a kinetic attack. Eventually, it was followed up with a hybrid attack in 2014, long before the actual kinetic phase of 2022. So whether or not it is possibly a sign of communications cutoff is a sign of an attack, it really has to be seen holistically on whether or not there are other indications, such as, for example, are they preparing to turn the exercises into an actual quarantine or into an actual blockade, as seems to be one of the scenarios. Because when it comes to the PRC, they have three options. It's either a blockade of the island, or a low-intensity kinetic, or a high-intensity kinetic attack. All of which, to be honest, may or may be presaged or not by communications cutoff. Just an FYI.
My follow-through is, what do we do as a country?
That is a complicated story because you need to monitor really your cables. One possibility is to use also the sensors on the cables. You have different. You have your classical cable, but you have also the cable with sensors, and you can feel at a distance movements in the sea. You can detect officially. You can detect earthquakes, but the objective also is you can detect also movement of submarines, which can also cut your cable. So you have different possibilities, but you need a lot of means to do that.
Would that be the subject of Philippine-France collaboration?
Why not?
The ambassador is there. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, the lady there at the back. The one wearing eyeglasses.
Hi, sir. Malu Bartolome here from Business Mirror. For Admiral Pama or other panelists, recently there was a report that was released that the world has crossed into a dangerous new climate reality with warming oceans triggering irreversible tipping points. So that means anything that we do now will most likely be irreversible. And that includes our coral reefs. It says here that our coral reefs, whatever we do, is already near the tipping point. So my question is, given that we are in the middle of the coral triangle and that we have so much militarization in the West Philippine Sea, should there be some sort of more aggressive effort to protect the seas and set aside our differences in the West Philippine Sea in the name of survival. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, a more aggressive action definitely is called for. But the bigger question now is the issue about the synergy of those who would be doing the action. In fact, that's one of the reasons I was emphasizing on these two bills, because hopefully we would have a basis, a platform by which these quote unquote aggressive actions to be undertaken would have a reference. Now, we are in a position now to push the envelope in so far as doing more, quote unquote, aggressive actions because we are leveraging on the different, as we say, rules-based actions. In fact, again, I would like to cite what came out of the NIS Ocean Actions Plan, because at the global level, as I was mentioning earlier, we now have a reference, and that would include the climate, the COP21 for climate, the SF, the Sendai Framework for Disaster, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, with our ratification of the NIS Ocean Action Plan, which can also be called a NICE Ocean Action Plan, we now have references and basis for more aggressive actions. Now, domestically, we heard from our BFAR colleague, they have already a lot of these policies, protocols, and actions. The same thing, the Coast Guard, the Navy, all these things are there. It's now a question of cohesiveness of actions we have. We are at a tipping point. I agree with you. Climate change is there. Warming is already there. And the bleaching is, the coral bleaching is just simply nakakarimarim na in our language in the Philippines. So to answer your question, yes, we have to implement more aggressive action, but it has to be based on a very good basis and a very good coordinated action plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Pama. Any other question? Yeah, the gentleman at the back, standing, the one standing, yeah.
Thank you for opportunity. Fred BFAR Scholar Batch 1995. Looking ahead, any thoughts on territory being jurisdiction of stewardship rather than national sovereignty? Stewardship with a view to adequate delivery of fundamental sufficiency and well-being. Right. Territory from national sovereignty to jurisdiction of stewardship. We cannot harass anyone.
Are you asking a question
Thoughts,
or
thoughts.
thought?
Yeah.
So you wanted you to.
What I actually able to get from the point of gentleman is on not actually in terms of fish management. It entails not the national territory, but you're actually referring to co-management in terms of environmental stewardship. And I think in terms of co-management or environmental stewardship, the circuit actually is on the message. For example, in the case of the West Philippine Sea, we know that the intrusions, there's encroachments, read down to the destruction of our marine resources. But when I say the battle is in the message, we need really to highlight that this destruction would not just affect the Philippines. We need to take note of the interconnectivity of the resources. For example, in these waters, whatever destruction happening in the West Philippine Sea would actually mean destruction in the nearby waters, not only within our internal waters or territorial sea or exclusive economic zone, but also in the waters of the neighboring states. So this is where environmental stewardship should come in. So it's not about really national territory. It's not about jurisdiction, but it's about co-management of these nations in terms of responsibility pertaining to upholding the integrity of our marine environment.
Thank you. Do you have any?
Before I pass it on to Neil, well, in the interest of time, I cannot explain it well, but I would like to request the gentleman to refer to, again, the NIS Ocean Action Plan, because one of the things that's being undertaken, being said, the other name of the NIS Ocean Action Plan is BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. And in that aspect, it's quite clear there, it offers opportunities, but it also offers challenges. It's a two-bladed thing. However, at least we now have a document ratified by more than 60 countries at this time, which, although it's non-binding, but then at least there's a basis to basically address that question. I'm sorry we were told to wrap up, but please refer to that document. Thank you.
Very
1
briefly,
minute.
Very briefly, there's a principle that we have, as noted in under the current previous American administration, cooperate where you can cooperate, compete where you must compete. And note that the South China Sea, for example, is defined as a semi-enclosed sea, which under UNCLOS is something that where the littoral states need to cooperate on, for example, environmental management, fisheries management, etc. So that is actually there. Even with our territorial titles and disagreements, we can actually cooperate on environmental management on a multilateral basis, provided all of the relevant parties are willing to work in good faith. That is the political foundation for any cooperation. So the basis is there. Someone has mentioned ABNJ. We have the Convention on Biological Diversity, all of which are premised on the idea that territorial states will cooperate for the common good, including the global common good of the global ecology. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, our experts. So allow me to wrap up, to close this panel, that the future of this country should be defined how we use the word resilient in protecting the West Philippine Sea. And for us to be called again the Pearl of the Orient, we have to ensure that West Philippine Sea, as Father said, atin ito. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I like what he said, Professor Silva. Cooperate where you can cooperate, compete when you must compete. Thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry to rush you. We're a little tight on the timeline today. And so at this point, we're going to be taking a very quick photo whilst I introduce, call back up stage, the ambassador of the Embassy of France in the Philippines, Her Excellency Marie Fontenelle, to deliver the closing remarks. Oh, sorry, Professor Dindo, please do come up as well. And Ambassador Marie. You see, this is what happens. There's the token woman they call up on stage, right? Professor. Okay. Oh, another token woman. They're telling me to join the photo. Oh.
One more. You may go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I will really be short for these closing remarks because the morning has already been long but so fruitful. I think it was a very, very, very fruitful fifth Blue Talk. Maybe to conclude and share two takeaways from this morning, which is very difficult to do because it's only two when we have learned so much from our panelists. and whom I thank immensely, all of you. Thank you for participating and for your contribution today. First takeaway, to like a reminder for the next Blue Talks to come, it's always good to hear from the academe. We need, particularly talking from a government perspective, we really need to base and to rely our decision on evidence. And so that's why we need academe. And I want to thank once again our researchers today, particularly the three French ones, Benjamin, François-Xavier, Céline, thank you so much, but also for your Filipino colleagues who have talked today. It's really, really good because you don't have any political bias, or maybe you do, but you should not as researchers. And we've seen how important it was to rely your presentation on evidence, on facts, and we need that. And it allows you to be very candid, very blunt sometimes, but we need that for our discussion. So first takeaway, we will continue definitely to talk together and to engage in this dialogue. Maybe second takeaways, we've definitely, this is a long-term question, long-term cooperation, and we have to find the ways together, the Philippines, France, but also all the colleagues here present from the diplomatic like-minded corps. We need to engage in the long run, and indeed we have to try to prevent any hiccups, or maybe hiccups is okay, but no way backwards. So we have to set this long-term view on the matter. And since it's a long-term cooperation, it means it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And since we are all here as marathonians, let's go eat. We need force for the future. Thank you so much once again. Thank you, Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Fontanelle, for that very inspiring message. And you're absolutely right. I personally am quite impressed at how much we were able to cover today in such a short span of time. Everything from maritime domain awareness and defense to information security to biodiversity and conservation. So thank you to all our speakers and to the audience for such great participation. And our hope is that today's conversations continue to guide our collective efforts towards a sustainable, inclusive, and secure Indo-Pacific. Again, thank you to everyone for staying with us this whole time. And here's to stronger partnerships and bluer